£1,000 in tax-free cash? Text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
she could have said stunt.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's TRIC Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you, and once again, a very happy Monday. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. Now, there are just 3 days to go until the general election. Yippee! I hear you cry. Yet, with endless Conservative talks of supermajorities, blank cheques, and a generation of Labour power, today I'm asking the simple question: have the Tories simply given up? Last night, Emmanuel Macron was all but wiped out by the right-wing national rally in a snap election that he called in France. But will Macron cling onto power by doing a deal with socialists? And what will all of that mean for the future of the EU and for Britain? And in case you missed it, Gareth Southgate's England were just 86 seconds from disastrously exiting the Euros when a Jude Bellingham miracle goal saved them from death row. For now, the 3 Lions limp on, but for how long? I'll speak to former England legend Trevor Stephen to discuss what I think is the worst game of football I've ever seen England play. That's all coming up in your next hour. Well, the show, hope you had a fantastic weekend. Let's get cracking in general election week. Thursday is the big day. I bet you just can't wait for it to be over. Or are you queuing up to vote on Thursday to make sure you have your say in the future of the country? Now, call me a pessimist, but don't you think last night's football match was the worst I've ever seen England play? A lot of people I was watching it with, got to be honest, were hoping England might get knocked out. So we get rid of Gareth Southgate and have a fresh start for the World Cup. Please tell me I've been a grizzled cynic, too long in the tooth to even be saying such things in public. But do you have any hope that 3 Lions can actually bring it home, or will they just be coming home once again crestfallen and defeated? Plus, Emmanuel Macron, could he be on his way out? Well, put the champagne on ice, but not just for yet. Now, get in touch all the usual ways, gbnews.com/your say. But before we kick off the show, here's your headlines, and it's Tamsin Roberts.
Martin, thanks very much and good afternoon from the GB Newsroom. It's 3:02. The Prime Minister says Britain would become the soft touch of Europe on illegal migration under a Labour government. He says flights to Rwanda are an essential deterrent for illegal migrants coming to Britain and warns that other parties have failed to put forward credible alternatives.
It is a deterrent. It's very simple. I don't think illegal migrants should get to stay in our country. They should be removed to a safe alternative. That is the only way to stop people coming in the first place. That's what you'll get if I'm your Prime Minister. A vote for anyone else just means that we are going to become the soft touch of Europe when it comes to illegal migration. We've had two debates head-to-head, and anyone who's watched them would have seen that Keir Starmer just simply can't answer the question. What would he do with illegal migrants that come to our country? He doesn't have a plan. I have a plan.
Meanwhile, political parties are appealing to undecided voters in the final days before Thursday's election. Rishi Sunak is urging people not to give Labour a supermajority amid polls giving Sir Keir Starmer a 20-point lead. But the Labour leader says a clear mandate is needed to repair Britain's economy and warns apathy could lead to another 5 years of the Conservatives.
And this has to be a summer of change. That's our one job this summer, a summer of change. And so whether you're a family that's been struggling with the cost of living crisis for months and years on end with bills bearing down on you, whether you're a business that's struggled because of the damage that's been done to the economy, or whether you've served your country in uniform or in your community, then this campaign, this positive Labour campaign, is for you, and the fight for change is for you.
Sir Ed Davey is urging voters to take the plunge and do something they've never done before by voting for the Liberal Democrats.
3, 2, 1, bungee! By Liberal Democrats!
The party's leader took part in a bungee jump as he urged voters to take a similar leap of faith when they head to the polls on Thursday. He says every vote for the Liberal Democrats is a vote to fix the NHS, end the sewage scandal and tackle the cost of living crisis.
Well, I'm asking people to do something, many people do something they've never done before, which is vote Liberal Democrat this coming Thursday. We're finding a lot of lifelong Conservatives considering us. They don't want to vote Conservative. Some young people who've never voted before, and we're saying, do something you've never done. I've just done it. I've never done that before. So take the plunge. Vote for health and care, which is our top priority, unlike anyone else's. Vote for a proper economic policy. Vote to end the sewage scandal and action on climate change. I think we've got policies that will attract people who were normally Conservative.
The populist right National Rally Party has taken more than 30% of the vote in France's elections, putting it on the cusp of forming government. The first round of voting is a huge setback for President Macron, whose centrist alliance trailed in third place with just 20%. If the current momentum continues, it could see the populist right rising to power for the first time since the Second World War. The final outcome will depend on days of negotiations between parties before next week's runoff vote, though many are now predicting a hung parliament. Energy prices will become cheaper from today as the latest price cap takes effect. The energy regulator Ofgem's cap fell by 7% after a drop in wholesale prices. It means that a typical 12-month bill will be around £112 cheaper than a year ago, though another rise is expected in October. The average house price was up by 0.2% in June as higher mortgage rates keep many people out of the property market. It means the average cost of a home across the UK is just over £266,000, which is 1.5% more than last year. According to the index by Nationwide, earnings growth has performed better than the property market in recent years, but it hasn't been enough to offset the recent spike in mortgage costs. And British champion Emma Raducanu takes to centre court in Wimbledon soon, where she's expected to face tough competition from her Russian opponent. The crown jewel of British tennis gets underway today, with reigning men's champion Alcaraz hoping to retain his title. He's currently playing now on centre court. Andy Murray is expected to decide this evening whether or not he'll make a final singles appearance. The two-time former champion has been in a race against time since struggling with a back problem that led to surgery just last weekend to remove a spinal cyst. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tamsin Roberts. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Tamsin. Now let's get kicking off because the main parties continue to ramp up their election campaigning with only 3 days left to convince voters ahead of the polls opening, of course, on Thursday. But with the Prime Minister campaigning in safe Conservative seats and with yet more talk about handing Labour a so-called supermajority, have the Tories simply given up? Well, this is what Mr Sunak had to say when asked about this question earlier on today.
Absolutely not. I'm fighting hard for every vote. I don't take a single place or person for granted. But I don't want Britain to sleepwalk into the danger of what an unchecked Labour government with a supermajority would mean. And that means handing Labour a blank cheque that people won't be able to get back, a blank cheque to put up everyone's taxes, to make us a soft touch of Europe when it comes to migration, to reverse my cost-saving net zero reforms, and to ensure pensioners pay a tax for the first time in our country's history on the state pension. I don't want that to happen. So I want to talk to as many people as possible about the choice at this election. A vote for the Conservatives, a vote to have your voice heard. I will fight for you, I will stand up for you, and crucially, continue to cut your taxes.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister was also challenged over his claim that migrants in Calais are waiting for a Labour government before making the crossing, and he doubled down by criticising the Labour leader for not having a plan on the issue.
Keir Starmer just simply can't answer the question. What would he do with illegal migrants that come to our country? He doesn't have a plan. I have a plan. They're going to go on planes. They're not going to be out on our streets. That's how we'll solve this problem. Anyone who cares about this issue has got to vote Conservative. Do not surrender our borders to the Labour Party. Do not vote for anyone else. Vote Conservative so we can stop the boats.
Well, let's now get the latest from the Tory campaign trail and speak with GB News' political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, welcome to the show. So we're on the final furlong, Catherine, just 3 days to go. It's worth pointing out there on the topic of illegal immigration, we reached the 4,000 mark, Catherine, 4,000 since the general election was called. 4,000 reached today. The bookies, Catherine, astonishing. I've got Labour 500 to 1 on to win the most seats, 151 on to win a majority. With numbers like that, Catherine, it looks all but over for the Conservatives, doesn't it?
Well, it does, but the Prime Minister talking in Stoke-on-Trent South a little bit earlier, saying that he is going to fight until the very end, taking inspiration from Jude Bellingham, of course, with the football, saying it's not over till it's over. But I mean, look at where the Conservatives are campaigning. They're very defensive, of course. They're going to Conservative seats that would in ordinary times be safe. But these, of course, are not ordinary times, and possibly no such thing at the moment as a truly safe Conservative seat. So Stoke-on-Trent South, that's one that had been Conservative just since 2017, had previously been solid Labour, but they're defending an 11,000 majority there. Now, we're currently in the West Midlands. I can't tell you exactly where for security, but where I'm standing, the Conservatives in 2019 had a 20,000 majority. Now, the fact that the Prime Minister is coming here just as a measure, I suppose, of the trouble that they are in. And the messaging really has changed, hasn't it? Because at the beginning of this campaign, sure, they were 20 points behind Labour, but they thought that the polls would narrow. They had all sorts of messages and announcements that they thought would improve their standing. That, of course, was before two things. The first of all being the D-Day disaster. The second of all being the return of Nigel Farage, and frankly, Reform are eating them alive, because it's not so much that large numbers of people are going to Labour. Of course, there will be Labour voters who lent their votes back in 2019 to Boris Johnson on the promise of getting Brexit done that are going back to Labour. But talking to Conservative candidates round the country, Mostly what they're finding is it's Conservative voters that are just cross with them, that are either planning on sitting at home or voting for reform. So Rishi Sunak really targeting them and saying, look, this is not a by-election. I know you're cross with us. I know you're fed up. I know it's been difficult. But if you don't vote Conservative, you're basically going to end up giving Labour a massive majority and trying to worry people, saying, look what this would mean. It could give them power for a generation. They're going to put up your taxes. He said, mark my words, your house, your pension, your savings, they will tax it. So it does look like the Conservatives are going to lose this election. I think the only question is by what margin. Projections, depending on the polls, say they could be left with something between 50 and 150 seats. We will have to see. We don't have very much longer to find out.
Well, Catherine Forster, the general election started on a wet and windy Downing Street, and now your umbrella there, almost a metaphor for a campaign being literally blown away. Well, let's now get the views of the chief political commentator at The Independent, John Rentoul. John, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. So we had a footballing metaphor there, a colourful footballing metaphor. Is there time for a Jude Bellingham moment, a dramatic bicycle kick into the back of the net to save the Conservatives in the last minute against all of the odds? Or, John, is the writing simply on the wall and the voters want to show the Conservatives the red card?
I think it's too late, really, for anything to happen. I mean, you know, there would have to be, I don't know, there'd have to be a nuclear war or something. It's very difficult to see how this can be turned around now. And you know, the Prime Minister's words that we saw there were interesting because he actually used the word supermajority, meaningless word, obviously, in the British Constitution, but we know what he intends us to take away from that, which is he's warning voters not to give Labour too much power, too much of a majority. So that's the clearest sign that the Conservatives are essentially in damage limitation mode now.
And meanwhile, John, the Labour Party are very much saying, let's push all the way to the final whistle. Sir Keir Starmer saying today, this is the final mile. These are the hard yards. And I guess the message here, John, with the benefit of history, is don't let complacency get in the way of people perhaps staying at home or perhaps even experimenting with the Greens or the Lib Dems. Sir Keir Starmer here pushing for every single vote to make sure that this happens.
Yeah, and both party leaders are doing exactly the same thing. I mean, the priority now is just to get the vote out. I mean, you're not going to change many people's minds in the last few days, although it's interesting to see which arguments the Prime Minister was using there. I mean, it is essentially immigration, the small boats particularly, and tax that he's emphasising, whereas Labour is much more general. I mean, the Labour's last pitch is change, and that's very, very vague. It encompasses as many people as possible. And as you say, the Labour Party is a bit worried that all this talk of a foregone conclusion means that its supporters won't bother to turn out. But I think that's going to be much more of a problem for the Tories, because I think there are a lot of Conservative inclined voters out there who are so disillusioned that they will either vote for reform or they'll stay at home.
And when you look at the odds, John, it's astonishing. As I just said, with the bookmakers now, Labour are 500 to 1 on. So £500 down, you get one solitary quid back to win the most seats. 151 on, £150 down, £1 back to get a majority. Have you ever heard, or do you ever remember anything of that nature in your entire career as a political journalist?
Well, obviously, Martin, I don't bet on politics, as nobody should, really. Look what trouble it's got the Tories into. But no, I do follow the betting markets quite closely because they're quite an interesting guide, although not a very reliable one on politics, it has to be said. But in this case, the odds are so overwhelming that, as you say, it is pretty much unprecedented.
And what about this nature of, you say that Sir Keir Starmer's campaign has been general. It was his campaign to lose. After all, I wonder actually, John, when we look back, if that was a shrewd thing to do. Because when Rishi Sunak said, I will stop the boats, and today it's been 4,000 illegals cross the channel, and the thing is, since the general election was called, we will lower your taxes, when there's been 17 straight tax rises by the Conservatives, has, in a sense, playing fast and loose been a benefit?
What, for Keir Starmer?
Yeah.
You're not answering any of the difficult questions throughout the campaign. Absolutely. I mean, the Labour Party has played a defensive masterclass, really, in this campaign. In a way, they haven't put a foot wrong. Although I do think the star of the campaign has been Paul Johnson, the boss of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, who accuses both main parties of a conspiracy of silence about the implications for public spending after the election. But I think, in a sense, the voters know that taxes and public spending will be higher under a Labour government than they would be under a Tory government. And actually, I think most voters are pretty comfortable with that. And I think we do need to spend more on the NHS. In particular. John, the Labour campaign is not being particularly straight with people. I don't think the voters are going to hold it against them.
And John, can I ask you one final question quickly, if I could? Voter turnout could be a key issue here. As you say, a lot of Conservatives are going to stay at home, draw the blinds, pretend that it isn't happening. And also there may be that kind of thing, oh, well, Labour are going to get in. What's the point of me voting for the Labour Party? Do you think low voter turnout could be an issue in this election, which could have a couple of surprises here and there?
Well, I think people will wring their hands about it and say, gosh, it's terrible. But actually, that's what happens in a democracy. If people don't want to turn out and vote, you can't make them. I mean, you can. I mean, in Australia and Italy, for example, they have compulsory voting. I don't think that's a good idea. If people don't want to vote, then that's up to them. And I think there will be a lot of hand-wringing and breast-beating about low turnout if that is what happens. But I think the main cause of it is going to be the fact that natural Conservative voters are disillusioned and can't bring themselves to make the trip to the polling station.
And of course, don't forget, low turnout could benefit the smaller parties. The protest vote could be amplified. John Rentoul, chief political commentator at The Independent, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very, very much for joining us. Now, we've got loads more, of course, on the election throughout the show today. And there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com. And you've helped to make it the fastest growing national news website in the country. So thank you very much. Now it's time for the Great British Giveaway now, and it's a whopper. The chance to win a huge 30 grand tax-free cash. It's our biggest prize to date, and here's how you could trouser the lot.
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest cash prize of the year so far. With an extra £30,000 in your bank account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For a chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, coming up, we'll be getting the very latest as the search for missing British teenager Jay Slater in Tenerife is called off. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
History lecturers at the University of Liverpool have been advised to problematise whiteness and heterosexuality in their seminars. They are saying that you should be guilty if you're white and heterosexual. Not using the long words they use, but that's kind of what they're saying.
Yeah, but do you know what? History in this country is concerned with more and has been lived by more white people and more heterosexuals, right? And that's the history. I'll tell you something else, Dawn. This is Russell Group University material here. This is Liverpool. It's a really good university. Mm-hmm. The thing that really got me going apart from this, and I thought it was an AI generation of words input into a system to come up with from something. It's ridiculous. The main issue I have is the verb problematise. Mm. I've never heard of that before. Yeah. So they should be prioritising grammar. Let's get first principles back in there firstly.
It's just promoting anti-racism.
It's not, Amy.
It is. Wait. It's just bringing the marginalised voices into the discussion. So
no, what they're saying is look at British history through the optic of
all perspectives. So let's look at it from the perspective of a queer person growing up. Let's look at it from the perspective of somebody from...
But that's not the majority.
When I actually looked at the evidence, it's all about unpacking bias. And you have to admit there has been a white bias in history.
No, there hasn't, because the facts...
From a white perspective...
Amy, the facts are, in history, most people in this country are white and heterosexual.
Of course, but then there's still...
So that's the history.
...voices that deserve to be brought into the discussion as much as the dominant...
Look,
like, that's all decolonising the curriculum is hearing all sides of the argument. Surely we at GB News love. We celebrate that. That's what we do.
We do, but we're not telling anybody it's bad to be white or it's bad to be...
Exactly.
That is not what...
Amy, it is. It is.
Amy.
The People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
This election night, we're putting on a party.
And you are invited.
We'll be here with you.
Following all the twists and turns.
As well as all the live reaction from our election night watch party.
With our GB News lineup.
And as morning breaks, we'll be here with breakfast from 6 a.m.
As it becomes clear who the winners and the losers really are.
Vote 2024.
Thursday, the 4th of July.
Only on GB News.
Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:25. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. And I've got some breaking news for you. And UEFA is investigating a gesture made by England midfielder Jude Bellingham after he scored a late equaliser against Slovakia yesterday evening. Just to quickly repeat that, UEFA is investigating a gesture, as a hand gesture, made by England midfielder Jude Bellingham after he scored a late equaliser against Slovakia yesterday evening. The Real Madrid star gestured towards the Slovakian bench after his overhead kick brought England level in the dying seconds of injury time. And UEFA released a statement on Monday which read, a UEFA ethics and disciplinary inspector will conduct a disciplinary investigation regarding a potential violation of the basic rules of decent conduct by the English Football Association player Jude Bellingham, having allegedly occurred in the scope of this match. Now, if you saw that last night, it really, in my opinion, was something that a lot of players just do. Absurd. Anyway, the investigation is underway. More on that as we have more details. Now, moving on, Jay Slater's family are to meet with Spanish police today after officers called off the search for the Lancashire teenager in a mountainous area of Tenerife. And the family say they will continue to look themselves after being left disappointed by a call for volunteers which saw just 6 people turn out. to look for the teenager over the weekend. Well, let's now speak with GB News' reporter Charlie Peters, who's been covering this story since the beginning. Charlie, welcome to the show. So, at the end of the week, last week, the situation was there was expected to be a large turnout of locals and tourists to help with the police. That didn't happen, and now the entire thing's been called off. Charlie, bring us up to speed.
Well, the search is over, but the investigation continues. And as we understand it, the Civil Guard are going to continue to look into all relevant lines of inquiry after calling off that search in the northwest of the island. And I think it should be stressed that this massive search, as they termed it, for 9 a.m. on Saturday, was only to those who had the specialist training and understanding of the area to contribute. It would be worthless having randomers just turning up to lend a hand. They needed people who were able to deal with the terrain and had the requisite fitness and capabilities to deal with that sort of mountainous environment, and also to work closely with the Civil Guard. And the Civil Guard is like the French gendarmerie or the carabinieri in Italy. They have a military ethos, and that's why there's not been so much information coming from the Civil Guard during the search for Jay Slater. They're not interested in regular press conferences. There's no family liaison officer. It's just an investigation. And while the search is being called off, that does hint that they are extremely confident that Jay Slater is not within that radius that they've dictated in the rural Deteno area on the island. Now, they've had several units of the Civil Guard there, helicopters, drones, and indeed sniffer dog reinforcements from Madrid last week. They've searched and they've researched, and they've had that significant expanded operation over the weekend. That search has been closed, but the investigation is still going, does suggest that they have other areas of inquiry that they're looking into. Now, there has been all sorts of social media sleuthing and online speculation as to what that could mean. We've had a third-party investigator on the island linked with the family, saying that he believes the criminal underbelly on the island could have a link to the 19-year-old's disappearance. But so long as that search is off, speculation continues. But one reporter on the island told me this morning that he thinks the Civil Guard have a favourite theory. They have a line of inquiry they're going to be pursuing closely. And he also told me that there's a good chance that they will be considering the possibility that Jay Slater is being held against his will.
Wow. And meanwhile, Charlie, the family is slamming the search as a PR stunt, claiming they're being left in the dark.
Yeah, they've said they're heartbroken by the end of the search. I think it's potentially quite harsh for people to describe it as a PR stunt, because it's clear that there has been significant work there. And while they've not been very communicative about what they're up to, what their latest bits of evidence are, that's kind of come through, trickles through reporters on the ground and those observing them, they have demonstrated their search. When they've looked into a new area, they've moved on force. There have been those convoys, as I've said, those reinforcements of specialist officers and sniffer dogs from Madrid, also the helicopters and the drones. We saw them moving away from the ravines further up that mountainous terrain to look inside some of the caves, thinking as that could have been an area where Jay Slater sought some shelter. So while that search is off, there's no indication whatsoever that this investigation is being wound down. There's clearly a keen interest from the Civil Guard to get to the bottom of this situation and to pursue different lines of inquiry.
Well, the plot thickens for the search for Jay Slater. And Charlie Peters, thank you very much for bringing us fully up to speed. Excellent as ever. There's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including all the latest from the general election campaign trail as voters head to the polls in just 3 days' time. But first, it's your headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
The headlines this hour. The Prime Minister says Britain would become the soft touch of Europe on illegal migration under a Labour government. He said flights to Rwanda are an essential deterrent for illegal migrants coming to Britain, and warns that other parties have failed to put forward credible alternatives. He also took aim at Reform UK, saying Nigel Farage, the leader, hadn't done enough to tackle allegations of racism within his party. Meanwhile, political parties are making their final pitches to undecided voters ahead of Thursday's election. Rishi Sunak is urging people not to elect Labour with a supermajority, amid polls giving Sir Keir Starmer a 20-point lead. But the Labour leader says a clear mandate is needed to repair Britain's economy and warns apathy could lead to another 5 years of the Conservatives. And Sir Ed Davey is urging voters to take the plunge. If you're watching on television, you can see him bungee jumping as he puts that message into the public domain. And he says to do something they've never done before, vote for the Liberal Democrats. The party's leader took part in that bungee jump as he urged voters to take a similar leap of faith on Thursday. And in the United States, President Biden's family has reportedly urged him now not to stand aside, despite pressure from within his party to allow someone else to become the Democratic nominee. It comes after his performance in a televised debate last week, which was widely criticised and reignited concerns over his age and his suitability for the job. Here, energy prices will become cheaper from today as the latest price cap takes effect. The energy regulator Ofgem's cap fell by 7% after a drop in wholesale prices. It means that typical 12-month bills will be around £112 cheaper a year than they were a year ago, although another rise is expected in October. Let's just bring you some breaking news that's coming to us in the last few minutes or so. So Ian McKellen, the actor, has pulled out of his national tour of the play Player Kings. You may remember that was the performance that he was involved in when he tumbled from the stage during a fight scene. Well, in a statement, he said it is with the greatest reluctance, after taking medical advice to protect his recovery, that he will be withdrawing from the national tour. And as I said, it comes after the actor fell off the stage during a performance of the Noel Coward play in London's West End. We wish him well with his recovery. That's the news from GB News. I'm Polly Middlehurst. I'm back with more in half an hour. See you then.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
So the market's looking like this for you today, and the pound buying you $1.2674 and €1.1793 euros. The price of gold is £1,833 and 46 pence an ounce, and the FTSE 100 is standing today at 8,214.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you very much, Polly. Now, if you want to get in touch with us here at GB News, simply go to gbnews.com/your say, and I'll read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There will be some dry and at times sunny weather around as we go into tomorrow, but there's also going to be quite a bit of cloud for some of us and some outbreaks of rain, all due to a frontal system that is marching its way southeastwards currently. That's already brought a bit of rain across northern parts and will continue to bring some rain across many parts of England and Wales as we go through the rest of today. In the southeast, clinging onto the dry weather well into the overnight period, but then things are going to turn a bit cloudy and a bit damp here as we go through the night. Further west, some clear skies are going to develop overnight, but temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Most places holding up in double digits, particularly mild towards the east of England where we have that thicker cloud. So in the east and southeast, it is going to be a bit of a grey, damp start to the day tomorrow. If we take a closer look, and you can see some drizzly rain around, nothing particularly heavy here. Further west, a brighter picture, some sunny spells, a few showers perhaps for North Wales and northwest England. Mostly dry for Northern Ireland and much of northeastern England and eastern Scotland, but further west over western parts of Scotland, some fairly frequent showery rain quite likely here, perhaps the odd heavier burst, and some slightly blustery winds here, whilst elsewhere the winds don't look particularly strong. As we go through the day itself tomorrow, that rain cloud in the southeast will clear away and so turning drier here, but otherwise some bright sunny spells for most of us, a bit brighter, sunnier than today generally. However, towards the northwest of the UK, some more persistent showery rain will push its way in and a few showers are possible elsewhere. Temperatures similar to today, but in the southeast where we cling on to a bit more cloud, it may feel a little bit cooler. More rain piling its way in across northern parts as we go through tomorrow evening. Further south though, staying dry as we go through the end of the day. There could even be some late sunshine around. As we go through the rest of the week, some more changeable weather to come, particularly on Wednesday and Friday, and temperatures generally around or a little bit below average.
The latest GB News travel.
Hi again, good afternoon to you. I'm Jules Buckley. Scotland, southbound M74 in South Lanarkshire, still the outside lane combed off from junction 7 down to 8. That's Larkhall to Candyside for emergency repairs. The queue's there for about 20 minutes now. It's snaking back towards Hamilton at junction 6. Still queuing in Somerset, both sides of the M5 around Bridgewater. Junction 24 to 23 follows an earlier police incident. All the lanes are back open. Queues northbound to before Taunton, junction 25. Patchy queue southbound back to Weston-super-Mare at junction 21. And as you come off the southbound M3, the exit slip at Camberley at junction 4, where there's been a collision on that slip road there between a lorry and a car, so it's partially blocked and just starting to build congestion-wise. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:38. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now to SW19, where tennis fans have queued overnight, as usual, for the first day of the Wimbledon Championships. But one thing they'll be hoping for is good news on Andy Murray's fitness. Can the former champion grace the centre court for one last time? Well, joining me now to discuss this is our national reporter, Theo Chikomba. How you doing, Theo? Welcome to the show. So, before we kick off on these protests that have taken part again from the pro-Palestine movement, any news on Andy Murray?
Yeah, well, first of all, addressing the health of Andy Murray is that we are still waiting on that update. They did release a statement, him and his family, saying they are assessing his health at the moment and they are looking to provide that update today. So we should find out whether or not he'll be taking part in that singles match, which is due to take place tomorrow here at Wimbledon. However, he was seen here just 2 days ago over the weekend coming to practice. Just the practice courts are just over to my left, actually. So he was seen there just a couple of days ago. But what fans will be hoping, those who have travelled all across the UK, from across the UK and from different parts of the world, they'll be hoping to see Andy Murray take to the centre court tomorrow if he is fit to do so. So that's one thing we are all keeping our eyes on. And the second thing is the protest, which has been taking place here in southwest London, here outside Gate 1 and also outside Gate 3 and 5 as well, which are just a few yards away from here. And of course, we've seen around several dozen people actually who have been holding flags with a giant tennis ball saying Wimbledon supports genocide and amongst other things which they've been doing, including singing here as well and playing music throughout the day as well. However, we have heard from Barclays who've issued a response due to the criticism that they've been receiving, and they said we have been asked why we invest in 9 defence companies supplying Israel, but this mistakes what we do. And we also heard from the All England Club, which runs Wimbledon, and they said our ambition is to have a positive impact on the environment, and the environment is a core part of putting on a successful championships. We know that this is one of the defining challenges of our time, and we are fully committed to playing their part. So while there are tens of thousands of people coming here to see some of the biggest stars in tennis here at Wimbledon, there is a backdrop politically which has been building up in the last couple of days as people have been coming here, particularly today, to protest.
Thank you, Theo Chicomba there from Wimbledon. Has anybody else noticed how this lot seem to target Waitrose or Selfridges or the snooker or Glastonbury and now Wimbledon? I'll tell you what, lads, get yourselves down the Millwall, get yourselves down a Forest match, try and stop a football match from going on. Then we might see a very, very different picture. Let's get back to politics now and get more on the election campaign trail and now we'll speak with GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Nigel, welcome to the show. So we're presently waiting for Sir Keir Starmer to give another stump speech. Every vote being fought for, as you'd expect, on this final furlong. And indeed, Nigel, that seems to be the message. We've even got Steve Reid from the Labour Party trying to use a football metaphor on the heels of Jude Bellingham, saying the Tories could sneak through and win in injury time. This isn't over like a football match until the final whistle blows.
Well, that's sort of true, isn't it? I mean, no vote has actually been cast yet. And until they all are by 10 p.m. on Thursday night, we don't know that Labour are going to win. Now, certainly there isn't a single opinion poll since the election started that would suggest that the Tories would be victorious. And what they've moved to is a kind of damage limitation exercise. But Keir Starmer is quite right. I mean, he's going around the country at the moment, and basically his message is, look, these are the hardest yards, the final stretch towards polling day. And if people stay at home because they think a Labour win is a done deal, it just could go wrong.
And he's calling it a summer of change. And, of course, I'll be hoping that doesn't mean we're all going to go transgender. But on a serious point, let's look at the bookies numbers. The numbers, Nigel, are simply astonishing. Labour are now as short as 500 to 1 on to win the most seats. Bet 500 quid, get one solitary sovereign back. Labour majority now 150 to 1 on. Nigel, have you ever known anything like this in your time commentating on politics?
No, I haven't. And I'm sure that Tories who are fond of betting on political outcomes won't be betting on this one. No, I mean, this is astonishing. I mean, I certainly expected the polls to narrow during the election campaign, and they just haven't. Labour has been consistently 20 points ahead. That has not changed. There's been a little bit of an increase in reform. But no, this election campaign, in my experience, is absolutely unique. And this is the 11th one I've been covering.
And is there any way this can be turned around now? We were talking a moment ago about the fact that the Conservatives are campaigning in the safest of safe seats. It seems to be now, Nigel, purely an exercise in damage limitation.
Absolutely right. What they're trying to do is to remain the official opposition. They're not really campaigning for government. And for the last couple of weeks, they've been talking about Labour supermajorities and how to keep it down. So, yes, it is absolutely about damage limitation. The polls are suggesting that they could be as low as 50 seats left, which would make the Lib Dems the official opposition, because they're certainly predicted to get 50, possibly 60 seats in this election. So the reason that Rishi Sunak is out in what were otherwise safe seats is because he's just trying to save as many MPs as he can. Now, on the night, it may not be quite like that. I would think that the Tories should pull in around 150 seats. That's what should happen. But this election really is all over the place. I could be way out on that prediction.
Yeah, that's a very charitable estimate. And do you think that the threat of reform is something that may fizzle away as it comes to polling day, or something where people's attitudes will harden because there's a very, very big number, it would appear, of disenfranchised Conservatives out there who want to punish their own party?
Yeah, I think that a lot of voters are just simply disillusioned with the whole political system. They've been through a lot. We've been through COVID. We've been through the cost of living crisis. Energy bills are still huge, even though they've gone down today. Mortgages are up. So everyone's having a rough time. I think Reform have done themselves quite a bit of damage with two things that have happened. One is that Nigel Farage talking about NATO provoking the war in Ukraine. I think I know what he was trying to say, but that was actually a bit clumsy. And that's put some voters off. Also, the allegations of racism within his party. Image is everything during elections, and the image has become a bit tarnished for Reform. So I don't think they're going to make the major inroads they were hoping for. One poll gave them the possibility of 18 MPs, and I just don't see that happening.
Or perhaps there could be a calcification of the Reform vote against this, what they perceive to be the media clamping down on them. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Nigel Nelson. Thank you very, very much. Now we've got some news. We've got some news here just in. The Supreme Court has ruled that former President Donald J. Trump is entitled to some level of immunity from prosecution, a decision that may effectively delay the trial of the case against him on charges of plotting to subvert the 2020 election. The vote was 6-3, dividing along partisan lines. That's a huge breaking news story. We'll have more on the US election after this. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
So, question is, what can we do to get young people to eat healthy food? Here's dietitian and nutrition consultant Helen Bond. Helen, what do you think?
Eating habits formed at this age tend to persist into later life. We know we're eating too much fat, sugar, salt, and not enough of the good things like fibre, fruits and vegetables, all of those things. So yes, we need to help this age group. So they have the skill set and they have the nutrition knowledge to take that forward.
Do you agree that it is impossible to eat healthily on a budget and quickly as well? Or do you have any sort of fail-safe, affordable and very quick to prep meals that you'd recommend youngsters try?
It doesn't have to be expensive either, but you have to have those kind of cost-cutting hacks and those time-saving things in the kitchen. Make use, I always say, of things like peas, beans and lentils, which are a type of pulse, very inexpensive compared to meat, and yet they double up as one of your 5 a day, and also a great source of plant-based protein. If you overget a milk as something, you have too much milk, maybe make some lattes.
I just wanted to throw a shoe at the TV, really, because was there nothing else on or nothing else available? The point being, there is an audience, there is obviously an appeal, there's obviously people are watching this stuff. So what are they doing? Are they watching and not cooking?
I think that's it. They're watching and maybe enjoying all the cookery programmes like I do. And I'm a typical person in the kitchen. I must have about 100 cookbooks. But sometimes when you are time poor, you've got to feed a family or you've got to feed yourself and everything, you don't really know where to start. And I think that's why apps and having things online for this younger audience makes it much more accessible. Start with one recipe and build it up from there. Like I said,
The People's Channel.
This election night, we're putting on a party.
And you are invited.
We'll be here with you.
Following all the twists and turns.
As well as all the live reaction from our election night watch party.
With our GB News lineup.
And as morning breaks, we'll be here with breakfast from 6 a.m.
As it becomes clear who the winners and the losers really are.
Vote 2024.
Thursday, the 4th of July.
Only on GB News,
Britain's election channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's Newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frothy in here, isn't it?
You'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice.
Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10-4 now. We've got some breaking news for you to repeat. The Supreme Court has ruled that while the former US President Donald Trump is immune from criminal prosecution for official acts taken in office, he is not immune for unofficial acts. This, of course, refers back to the January the 6th insurgency, as it was called. Some degree, it would appear there, of immunity granted towards Donald Trump. And let's get the views on that now. In the studio here, I'm joined by James Hill, the political correspondent at The Spectator. James, welcome to the show. So we've got our own set of domestic politics, but this is big news. The possibility of Trump getting full immunity looks like it's not the case, but some immunity granted, which probably means the most likely outcome, he cannot get prosecuted for this before the November the 5th presidential election.
Absolutely. And after Friday's debate, where everyone could see what Joe Biden was producing a lamentable performance, and it looks like he's ever closely moving to the White House once again for a second term as president, this really kind of confirms what we thought, which is that the Supreme Court, a number of the judges of whom were appointed by Donald Trump in his first term as president, have agreed to strike down the original decision about what happened in January the 6th in 2021, when he protested against what went on in terms of the election results of 2020. And so, therefore, what we've had today is kind of, the legal confirmation of the political reality, really, which is that no one is, frankly, going to stop Donald Trump by legal means. If they want to stop Donald Trump, they're going to have to stop it with the ballot.
And the partial immunity means the lawyers will go to town on it. They'll kick it into the long grass. It effectively means any chance of a prosecution will be parked until after November the 5th. And that will surely increase the likelihood of this now going down to Trump as the full candidate against what seems to be a wobbly campaign for Joe Biden.
Absolutely, and I think that a lot of Republicans who may be on the fence about this, moderates, will say, look, this is the Supreme Court, this is our nation's highest court in the land. They've ruled against him 6-3, wasn't particularly close on this one, and they're going to be able to say, look, we've got the legitimacy here, this is what the court has been ruled, successive presidents have appointed these judges, and therefore they're going to get behind the president, and he's got momentum, unlike Joe Biden's struggling campaign.
Now, they voted on political party lines, 6-3, Republicans, Democrats, highlighting once again, though, the highly politicised nature of the judicial system, the legal system in America. They basically vote for their man.
Absolutely, and it's kind of a bizarre system, really, where they have, much more kind of political interference in this. It's much more partisan way. I think here in this country, it's basically done through a sort of quango, the Judicial Appointments Commission. I think perhaps some of those who'll be, previously sort of, talking about the Supreme Court and who cheered on the Blair reforms ought to be looking at this and think, hang on a sec, do we want to go down this route or not?
And what do you think now the Biden camp will do reflecting to this? It's now looking more and more certain they'll be facing Donald Trump. The New York Times astonishingly came out at the weekend saying Joe Biden must stand down for country, for party, for his entire career. And yet his wife, the First Lady, seems to be forlornly fighting on. What on earth is going to happen, do you think?
I think it's been the worst of all worlds. I think we're going to have 3 months of massive long debate about Joe Biden, how bad he is, and he's going to stick with him on the candidate because no one wants Kamala Harris, and he's going to stand in November and he's going to lose.
And therefore, it's looking more and more likely that there'll be the world's biggest temper tantrum if Donald Trump gets back in as the Terminator 2.
Well, this is going to be great, isn't it? I think both sides are going to switch arguments instead of protesting the election result. Suddenly, one side, which was going, this was legitimate, will go, hang on, that wasn't legitimate, and the others are going to say the opposite, aren't they?
And in terms of your job as a political journalist, mate, you must be loving it. I mean, if anything else, what a lot we've got to talk about. Just to recap on that breaking news there, you can see we've got live pictures from the Supreme Court. Donald Trump has received a degree of partial immunity, almost certain now to kick any chance of a legal case against him into the long grass this side of that presidential election. The biggest political show on earth, that's Bonfire Night, November the 5th this year. Donald Trump, partial degree of immunity. Plenty more to bring you on that story in our next hour. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. Now it's your weather with Alex Burkill.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There will be some dry and at times sunny weather around as we go into tomorrow, but there's also going to be quite a bit of cloud for some of us and some outbreaks of rain, all due to a frontal system that is marching its way southeastwards currently. That's already brought a bit of rain across northern parts and will continue to bring some rain across many parts of England and Wales as we go through the rest of today. In the southeast, clinging onto the dry weather well into the overnight period, but then things are going to turn a bit cloudy and a bit damp here as we go through the night. Further west, some clear skies are going to develop overnight, but temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Most places holding up in double digits, particularly mild towards the east of England where we have that thicker cloud. So in the east and southeast, it is going to be a bit of a grey, damp start to the day tomorrow. If we take a closer look, and you can see some drizzly rain around, nothing particularly heavy here. Further west, a brighter picture, some sunny spells, a few showers perhaps for North Wales and northwest England. Mostly dry for Northern Ireland and much of northeastern England and eastern Scotland, but further west over western parts of Scotland, some fairly frequent showery rain quite likely here, perhaps the odd heavier burst, and some slightly blustery winds here, whilst elsewhere the winds don't look particularly strong. As we go through the day itself tomorrow, that rain cloud in the southeast will clear away, and so turning drier here, but otherwise some bright sunny spells for most of us, a bit brighter, sunnier than today generally. However, towards the northwest of the UK, some more persistent showery rain will push its way in, and a few showers are possible elsewhere. Temperatures similar to today, but in the southeast where we cling on to a bit more cloud, it may feel a little bit cooler. More rain piling its way in across northern parts as we go through tomorrow evening. Further south though, staying dry as we go through the end of the day. There could even be some late sunshine around. As we go through the rest of the week, some more changeable weather to come, particularly on Wednesday and Friday, and temperatures generally around or a little bit below average.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Hi, good afternoon again to you. I'm Jules Buckley, Scotland. Firstly, the southbound M74 Larkhall down to Candyside. Junction 7 to 8 still struggling. Lane 2, the outside lane, remains combed off for emergency repairs. A 20-minute delay. Back towards Hamilton still at Junction 6. M5 still queuing around Bridgewater. Junction 24 to 23 north and southbound. Follows an earlier police incident. Northbound queue back before Taunton 25. Southbound struggling in patches back to West and Supermare Junction 21. Northbound M1, a lane closed on the exit slip to the Luton Airport Spur Road at Junction 10. There's a breakdown there. Also northbound, Flitwick up to Bedford on the M1. Junction 12 to 13, the earlier breakdown's gone. All lanes open, still some residual delays though. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
£30,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours. It's our biggest cash prize of the year so far, and you could be getting that winning call from us to tell you that you're our next Great British Giveaway winner.
You're joking. Really? Seriously, it's not a line, what is it?
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock. Like I said, I've never won anything like this. That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon. Thank you.
For a chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com/election party. Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's TRIC Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, there are just 3 days to go now until the general election. Yippee, I hear you cry. Yet, with endless Conservative talks of supermajorities, blank cheques and even a generation of Labour power, today I'm asking the simple question, have the Tories simply given up? Last night, Emmanuel Macron was all but wiped out by the right-wing National Rally in a snap election that he called. But will Macron cling on to power by doing a deal with the socialists? And what will that mean for the future of the EU and indeed for Britain? And Gareth Southgate's England were just 86 seconds from disaster exiting the Euros when a Jude Bellingham miracle goal saved them from death row. For now, the Three Lions limp on, but for how long? I speak to former England legend Trevor Stephen on what I think is the worst game of England I've ever seen England play. And that's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. It's always a pleasure to have your company. Just 3 days to go now until the general election. And we've just had some breaking news from America. Donald Trump will face at least some immunity from those trials about the insurgency on January the 6th after he lost the 2020 presidential election. That almost guarantees there won't be a successful legal case against him, opening the way for him to be the top candidate against somebody in Joe Biden who appears to have the lost confidence of those supporting him, certainly in the media, maybe even in his own party machine. And I'll tell you what, I thought that England match last night was the worst I've ever seen them play. OK, they won, but it took a miracle. Do you think that the Three Lions actually might have been better off getting knocked out? At least then we'll get rid of Gareth Southgate and start again. Or am I just a grizzled cynic? Stop complaining, Daubney. Tell me what you think. The usual ways. Get in touch, GBNews.com/your say. But first, it's your headlines with Polly Middlehurst. Well, no, actually, no, we're now going to Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer is talking on the stimulus cost live now. Keir Starmer. As a battleground
candidate, every week I am sent the league table for how we're doing so that we can be told off if we're not talking to enough people, etc., etc. And last week we had the best week we've had. So... we actually came 11th and only 7 conversations short of the top 10, which I'm really, really proud of. So next week we'll do better, I'm sure. The conversations that we've had have made it really, really clear that people are ready for change. There is a mood in Banbury, Chipping Norton...
OK, actually, we're going to cross back to the studio here because we had some problems there you may have seen with the very fast flickering video feed. Are we going to the headlines or are we going to have a quick chat in the studio? We're going to go to Polly Middlehurst for our news headlines. Here she is.
Yeah, come to me. I've got some breaking news for you from the United States. As you've been hearing, actually, the Supreme Court has ruled that the former presidents are immune from prosecution for some actions taken while in office. This decision throws out a judicial decision now that rejected the former president, Donald Trump's bid to shield himself from criminal charges related to his attempt to overturn his 2020 election loss. That decision today means former presidents can be immune, therefore, for actions taken within their constitutional authority, but not for actions they may take in a private capacity. That's the first time we understand somebody's been looking at history books. Since the 18th century, the court has found that presidents can be shielded from criminal charges. It is quite a development in the United States. Just to reiterate for you, the Supreme Court has ruled that Donald Trump does have some immunity from prosecution. This has been a long-awaited ruling on whether or not he is immune for official actions taken while in office, but the court has ruled former presidents are entitled to absolute immunity for official acts. But, of course, the question going forward, and no doubt will be the centre of attention of all the writing that is done on this for the rest of the day, the court has already said as well there is no immunity for unofficial acts, and that is no doubt what matters will hang on going forward. We will, of course, keep you up to date with Trump's trials and tribulations in the Supreme Court as the day progresses. Let's take you on now to the election in the UK, where the Prime Minister has gone on record today saying Britain would become what he's called the soft touch of Europe on illegal migration under a Labour government. He said flights to Rwanda are an essential deterrent for illegal migrants coming to Britain and warns that other parties have failed to put forward credible alternatives. Here's what he said.
It is a deterrent. It's very simple. I don't think illegal migrants should get to stay in our country. They should be removed to a safe alternative. That is the only way to stop people coming in the first place. That's what you'll get if I'm your Prime Minister. A vote for anyone else just means that we are going to become the soft touch of Europe when it comes to illegal migration. We've had 2 debates head-to-head, and anyone who's watched them will have seen that Keir Starmer just simply can't answer the question, what would he do with illegal migrants that come to our country? He doesn't have a plan. I have a plan.
Rishi Sunak. Well, political parties are appealing now to undecided voters, with the election just being on Thursday in the final hours before people make up their minds. Rishi Sunak's urging people not to give Labour a supermajority amid polls giving Sir Keir Starmer a 20-point lead. But the Labour leader says a clear mandate is needed to repair Britain's economy and warns apathy could lead to another 5 years of the Conservatives.
This has to be a summer of change. That's our one job this summer, a summer of change. And so whether you're a family that's been struggling with the cost of living crisis for months and years on end with bills bearing down on you, whether you're a business that's struggled because of the damage that's been done to the economy, or whether you've served your country in uniform or in your community, then this campaign, this positive Labour campaign, is for you, and the fight for change is for you.
Well, let's just recap you on that news that we received about half an hour ago about the actor Sir Ian McKellen. He's pulled out of his national tour of the West End production of Player Kings. In a statement, he said that after receiving medical advice, he's decided to step aside from the play with what he called the greatest reluctance. It comes after the veteran actor fell off the stage during a recent performance of the Player Kings at the Noel Coward Theatre in London's West End. He assures ticket holders that his replacement, David Seamark, and Robert Icke's production remain as dazzling as ever. Now, in France, the populist right-wing National Rally Party has taken more than 30% of the vote in the country's snap election. That puts it on the cusp of forming a government. The first round of voting is a huge setback for President Macron, whose centrist Alliance Party trailed in 3rd place with just 20% of the vote. If the current momentum continues, it could see the populist right-wing party, led by Marine Le Pen, rise to power for the first time since the Second World War. The final outcome, though, will depend on days of negotiations between parties before next week's runoff vote, though many analysts now saying that France could be looking at a hung parliament. The average house price was up by 2.2% in June, as higher mortgage rates kept many people off the property ladder. It means the average cost of a home across the UK is just over £266,000. That's 1.5% more than last year. And according to the index by Nationwide, earnings growth has performed better than the property market in recent years, but it hasn't been enough to offset the recent spike in mortgage costs. England's Jude Bellingham is being investigated over a gesture he made during England's win over Slovakia in the Euros last night. I don't know if you saw it. The England footballer is facing a probe over a potential breach of the basic rules of decent conduct at Euro 2024. It's understood to relate to Bellingham grabbing his crotch, if I might say, after scoring England's equaliser in added time of the match. Harry Kane went on, of course, to score another goal in extra time, securing the England win. That's the news from the GB Newsroom. I'm Polly Middlehurst, and I've got more news for you in half an hour. See you then.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Maggie Bolly, beautiful stuff. Now, the main party is continuing to ramp up their election campaigning with only 3 days left to convince voters ahead of the polls opening, of course, on Thursday. But with the Prime Minister campaigning in safe Conservative seats and with yet more talk about Labour handing Labour a supermajority, have the Tories simply given up? Well, this is what Mr Sunak had to say when asked about this earlier on today.
Absolutely not. I'm fighting hard for every vote. I don't take a single place or person for granted, but I don't want Britain to sleepwalk into the danger of what an unchecked Labour government with a supermajority would mean. And that means handing Labour a blank cheque that people won't be able to get back, a blank cheque to put up everyone's taxes, to make us a soft touch of Europe when it comes to migration, to reverse my cost-saving net zero reforms, and to ensure pensioners pay a tax for the first time in our country's history on the state pension. I don't want that to happen, so I want to talk to as many people as possible about the choice at this election. A vote for the Conservatives, a vote to have your voice heard. I will fight for you, I will stand up for you, and crucially, continue to cut your taxes.
Well, Rishi Sunak there, defiant, as you'd imagine. Now let's get the views of James Hill, the political correspondent at The Spectator, who is still with me in the studio. So, James, last night we saw Jude Bellingham, 86 seconds from disaster, a dramatic bicycle kick. Can Rishi Sunak pull off the political equivalent, or is he simply about to be shown the red card?
I fear it's more like Marcus Rashford. He peaked in 2021. I think Rishi's best days are behind him, unfortunately, for his sake. Look, he'd obviously, all the Tories would love to have a last-minute goal, but I think, it's too little too late, I'm afraid, for him.
And why do you think that's been? Looking back over this election, we were talking in the break, you were here that day, that fateful day, when the general election was announced. It started badly in the rain, hasn't really got any momentum. It's been dogged by scandal, left, right and centre. Nigel Farage enters the ring, as it were. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer escaping any real scrutiny on any of his policy. And today, James, we saw 4,000 illegal immigrants have crossed the Channel since that day when Rishi Sunak announced the general election. Has anything gone right for the Conservatives on this campaign?
Very little. A few attacks on tax have landed, but really, Rishi Sunak needs to make this election competitive by having a perfect campaign. And he's had a very imperfect campaign. D-Day, the betting scandal, the two big things, of course. But really, I think the die was cast many months ago, probably about 15 months or so, I think. He came into office. Initially, there was a bit of a, Rishi bounce, and after that, it just didn't get much better, I'm afraid, for him.
James, let's look ahead. We were talking there about the gambling odds. The Labour now party are 500 to 1 on to win the most seats. £1, £500 back down, £1 back, 150 to 1 on to get any form of majority. And yet, we just heard some breaking news about Donald Trump now facing, likely to get immunity. Le Pen caused a huge upset last night over that side of the Channel. How will Keir Starmer, if he's the Prime Minister, be able to work with people like Trump and Le Pen? It's going to be a hugely complicated thing. What do we know about Sir Keir Starmer that might flash the garter of how he'll be as a Prime Minister?
Well, I think he's a pragmatist, Keir Starmer, and that's very much in his credit when it comes to this. I think Labour's big mistake has been to talk about values, but talk about we'll be great pro-Europeans, we want to work with Europe, post-Brexit, etc. This is about interests. This is about what is in the interests of kind of transactional politicians like Donald Trump, like Le Pen's party. How do we kind of get a deal done, basically, over the line? And I think the best thing for Starmer is his pragmatism. He's willing to do deals in order to get what he wants. I think the key thing, of course, is that the rest of the world's moving to the right as Britain's turning left, and the key thing will be about finding common ground, and that'll probably mean a tougher line on migration.
Super stuff, James Hill. Always a pleasure to have you in the studio. And let's get more on the election trail now. I speak with GBNews' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson. Nigel, welcome back. So, since we last spoke, that breaking news about Donald Trump facing a degree of immunity, ostensibly, anything he said as president, he gets immunity from prosecution. That means he'll say, I made all those comments as president, not as a private individual. More likely, he'll be nailed on to be the candidate, if not the next president, if we're looking at the polling. And I wanted to ask you the question. If we look forward to a country that is governed by Sir Keir Starmer, I mean, all of the bellwethers seem to be showing us that, how will Keir Starmer and David Lammy, who once actively turned out to protest against Donald Trump coming to London, what about if Le Pen dramatically gets in France? Sir Keir Starmer's always talks about doing a returns deal with France. Le Pen won't want to do a returns deal. How might the Labour Party work on this new world stage?
Well, we're talking about not the Labour Party, but the Labour government. And what Keir Starmer has said, in fact, several times today when he's been asked this question, is that when it comes to foreign governments, he will work with whoever is in power. So if Donald Trump does win on November the 5th, then Keir Starmer will work with him. He may have to hold his nose a bit while he's doing it, but he will certainly work with America. They're our closest ally. Same goes for France, that if National Rally really do form the next assembly in France, once again, Keir Starmer will work with it. Now, whether or not that'll make life a bit more difficult, you mentioned immigration. One of the key things that Keir Starmer needs to do is get agreements with EU countries and perhaps the EU itself to help deal with immigration. So yes, I think that obviously right-wing governments are a little bit more difficult, but that doesn't mean you can't actually work with them.
And the message of the day has very, very much been, let's push all the way. Sir Keir Starmer himself said, this is the final mile. These are the last hard yards. Steve Reid, Labour's Shadow Environment Secretary, used a football metaphor, saying the election isn't over like last night's football match until the final whistle blows. You'd expect to hear that, Nigel. Steady as she goes, push all the way to the wire.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, all the policies are out there. Nobody's got anything new to announce. So the key now is to try and get voters out. Now, the Tories obviously want voters to stay at home because they fear the result that's going to come when they vote against them. But basically, the important thing now is to actually solidify the vote you've got. Try and persuade wavering voters that you're the right party to come into government. That's what Keir Starmer is doing. And he's quite right. There shouldn't be any complacency, that people shouldn't stay at home just because they think this election is all done. It's not all done, and it won't be all done until Thursday night.
Superb stuff. Nigel Nelson, thank you very much for joining us, as ever, and giving us your expert insight. Now, moving on, the Supreme Court, as we just said, has ruled that while former US President Donald Trump is immune from criminal prosecution for official acts taken in office, he is not immune for unofficial acts. And let's speak now with the founding director at the UCL Centre on US Politics, Dr. Thomas Gift. Thomas, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Would you mind just clarifying for people who aren't of a legal mindset precisely what that means in terms of official stuff versus unofficial comments made?
So thanks so much for having me. It's great to be with you. The first thing that I'll say is that this is somewhat of a complex case, and it's somewhat of a nuanced answer that the Supreme Court has given. Basically, there are three different categories of presidential actions. One is purely personal conduct. One is core constitutional conduct. And then the third is kind of this gray area in between where it's not necessarily clear. When it comes to core constitutional duties, this is the Article 2 of the Constitution. So things like overseeing immigration or overseeing the military, anything that is kind of constitutionally provided, that's absolutely immune. And then anything that a candidate is doing just purely in a personal context, that has no immunity. But there's a huge kind of gray area and lots of ambiguity about sort of what constitutes core constitutional duties versus personal whenever you get into things like campaigning.
And so what that means in this case, to be absolutely clear, Thomas, is that in terms of the January the 6th insurrection, as it was called, that's what this is ostensibly about. They're trying to make out the comments that Donald Trump made as president at that time contributed towards this. This now means, because of the way the vote went, 6 in favour, Republicans, 3 against, Democrats in this vote, Donald Trump will simply say, well, I made those comments as president, therefore I'm immune. Therefore, Thomas, knocking this into a cocked hat.
Well, that's what he's going to make, that case. And so essentially the ruling is going to get pushed back to the judge in the U.S. District Court in Washington, Judge Tanya Chutkan, and she will be responsible for deciding whether those statements were his constitutional duties or whether they were provided in a personal context. But it is really unclear because presidents do all sorts of activities that are kind of right on the border of campaigning and politics versus, core policy decisions. And, the one thing that we know about Donald Trump is he's probably blurred that line more than any prior president that we can remember in recent memory.
But Thomas, what this basically means, ambiguity, as you say, is a picnic for the lawyers. They feast on ambiguity. They will push this down the road. They'll try and push it definitely beyond November the 5th, that crucial date of the presidential election in America. With that in mind, the likelihood, the probability of there being an effective legal challenge against Donald Trump seems to have diminished with this ruling. The likelihood of him being the primary candidate has increased. And if you believe the polling, if you believe what happened since that debate, the likelihood with this ruling is that the legal challenge against Donald Trump has been derailed by this, and therefore the likelihood of him becoming the next president just increased.
I 100% agree with you. So a trial certainly will not happen before the election because this is going to be pushed down to the district court. That's good news for Trump. If he wins in November, which the polls suggest that he at least has a marginal edge, which has grown after you suggested after the debate, then he could shut down all of these prosecutions unilaterally because the president presides over the Department of Justice, appoints the Attorney General, and so effectively could say we're getting rid of all these criminal prosecutions. But I have to agree with you. I mean, the last week or so, all the momentum has been with Trump. All the discussion, of course, has been by the sort of absolutely cataclysmic performance of Joe Biden in the debate. And then you have this, more good news for Trump. So he's riding a high, certainly at the moment.
Dr. Thomas Gift, the founding director at the UCL Centre on US Politics, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much for boiling down a very complicated legal situation to make it easy for us to digest. That's fantastic. Thank you for your company. Very, very good. Now, last night, Emmanuel Macron was all but wiped out by the right-wing National Rally in a snap election. Don't forget, he called himself. But will Macron cling on to power by doing a deal with the left wing, with the socialists? And what would all of this mean for the future of the EU and, of course, for Great Britain? We'll find out next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Wiltshire police have arrested 2 people after they sprayed orange paint on Stonehenge.
Well, Just Stop Oil have shared a video saying it's to get the incoming government to sign up to a legally binding treaty to phase out fossil fuels by 2030. Of course, Stonehenge famously associated with oil, gas. I think the 5,000-year-old Neolithic Britons were prolific users of the internal combustion engine, and they drilled for lots of oil, so it makes perfect sense, of course.
Yes, we're going to be joined by Jill Taylor, a spokesperson from Just Stop Oil. Jill, thank you very much indeed. What on earth is this all about? This is just criminal activity under the guise of some kind of activism.
No, that's not. That paint will be washed off really easily. So it's not long-lasting damage at all, unlike the damage that is being done now by the fossil fuel industry and just keeping burning fossil fuels, putting more CO2 into the atmosphere. You're right, the Neolithic people were not prolific users of fossil fuels. They did not cause the kind of damage that we're causing now. That's all been within since the Industrial Revolution in the 150 years.
So because
this is when the damage has been done.
So because this stuff can be washed off, ergo there's no issue here. Well, Stonehenge aren't particularly happy about this. They've come out on their social media page and they say Stonehenge is protected by the Ancient Monuments Act and it is a criminal offence to damage the stones. There are also multiple rare lichen species growing on the stones that are also protected. So this isn't good for nature, is it?
I think you're getting things so out of perspective here. What isn't good for nature is the damage we're doing now, and what's not good for nature globally is not good for you, it's not good for me, and it's not good for the people watching this programme.
The People's Channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:25. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, we've got some new footage of Liberal Democrat leader Ed Davey has just come through. Let's take a little butcher's out of this. There you go. He's being towed on a donut. As you do, it's just been one long adventure playground tour. There he goes. He's about to flip over. That's him in Cornwall on a donut, being towed around the harbour in his rubber hat. He's been on a paddleboard. Go on, tip over, mate. He's been on a paddleboard. He's been on a water slide. Now he's on a donut flying around the harbour. At this point, generally, they go really fast around the corner and he does a human cartwheel and goes to a ragdoll. There, I'll tell you what, this driver of this speedboat has been very, very charitable. And earlier on, of course, he went onto a bungee jump. He went off a bungee jump saying, I'm trying something I've never done before, and he's trying to urge voters to follow him to do the same, maybe to rope them in to voting for the Liberal Democrats. Now, let's move on, because French right-winger Marine Le Pen has declared her party is practically wiped out. Emmanuel Macron, after a decisive victory in the first round of voting in France's snap election. Le Pen's party, National Rally, has achieved around 34% of the votes, while President Macron's coalition have crashed into third with around 21%. Well, let's get an insight now from French journalist Régis Le Sommier. Welcome to the show, Régis. A pleasure to have your company. So Le Pen is claiming she's wiped out Macron. Is it quite as simple as that?
Well, it's not as simple as that. She's not. Macron is not out of the race. He's still the president of France and will remain the president of France if he decides it until 2027. So he can stay as a president. Now he will have to choose probably between Marine Le Pen's camp, so Jordan Bardella, or somebody from the left, because his party won't be able to be, it won't be able to form any form of coalition right now, so they can have somebody from his party being nominated as the prime minister. So this is what's at stake in the next round of election in next Sunday. But now it's going to be very tricky to decide who's going to come out of the race. If the National Front, not National Front, Rassemblement National now will have enough seats to have an absolute majority. If it's the case, then Macron won't have no choice but to choose Jordan Bardella as his next prime minister. If it's not the case, then it's going to be a real turmoil. He will have to nominate somebody maybe from the left. It's very, very murky at the moment.
And Régis, just to explain to British viewers the complexities, the nuances of the French political system, round about now, Macron, presumably, and his party will be trying to horse trade with those on the left, doing their very, very best to try and keep Le Pen anywhere near power. But what would that mean? Would that mean adopting some of their policies? Would that mean a further crash on the euro, a further crash on the Paris Stock Exchange? Billions was wiped off the market in France when Macron called this snap election.
Yes, sure. There will be definitely consequence. But at the moment, it's a question of being logical. In some cases, we're seeing people, in some because of the huge turnout on this election, sometimes there are 3 competitors in the race still for the second round. And out of those 3 competitors, I'm going to give you one example. In Normandy, the former Prime Minister, Elisabeth Borne, is in a triangle election, and probably the far left, in order to have an agreement, some sort of agreement with Macron's side, will withdraw for her to win. and she embodies passing a very tough law, sometimes about retirement law, and which the left and the extreme left have fought tooth and nail, and now they're sort of forced to vote for her, which is completely doesn't make any sense. And these people that are trying to find a combination in order to avoid for Marine Le Pen's party to come to power are trying to make deals with people they hate and people they have no value in common. Now they can do it with several politicians in their side, but it's going to be for the electorate to decide. And we don't know at the moment if people, or either people from the left or people from Macron party will definitely vote for each other, which gives room for the National Front maybe to hope for to get enough margin to be able to have an absolute majority in Parliament. And so at the moment everything is very uncertain and nothing has been very clarified. In some cases there is no problem. Macron can go with the person from the left, but if it's somebody from the extreme left, especially from Jean-Luc Mélenchon party, which is called LFI, and these people have had a very tough stand and very extreme stance, either on social or on the question of Israel versus Gaza, Hamas, and they're very marginalized in France, but now they have a say in the next election. And a lot of people from Macron's side don't want to ally with them. So you see the whole complexity of the situation at the moment.
It's absolutely fascinating stuff. And, of course, the implications for what it means for Great Britain. Le Pen won't want to do any sort of asylum returns deal with Sir Keir Starmer. If he were to get in, we could talk on this all day, but we have to leave it there. Regis Le Sommier, fascinating stuff about the snap election in France, what it means for Macron. Now, there's loads more still to come between now and 5 o'clock. And we're speaking with the Conservative minister about whether his party has simply thrown in the towel ahead of this Thursday's general election. But first, here's your headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Hello there, the headlines this hour. Yes, in the United States, the Supreme Court has ruled that the former president, Donald Trump, and former presidents are immune from prosecution from some actions while in office. The decision throws out a judicial decision that rejected Donald Trump's bid to shield himself from criminal charges related to his attempt to overturn his 2020 election loss. Today's decision means that former presidents can be immune for actions taken within their constitutional authority, but not for actions they may take in a private capacity. That's the first time since the 18th century the court has found that presidents can be shielded from criminal charges. Here, the Prime Minister says Britain would become the soft touch of Europe on illegal migration under a Labour government. He says flights to Rwanda are an essential deterrent for illegal migrants coming to Britain, and he warns other parties have failed to put forward credible policies. He also took aim at Reform UK, saying Nigel Farage hadn't done enough to tackle allegations of racism within his party. Meanwhile, political parties are making their final pitches to undecided voters ahead of Thursday's election. Rishi Sunak is urging people not to give Labour a supermajority amid polls suggesting Sir Keir Starmer may have a 20-point lead. But the Labour leader says a clear mandate is needed to repair Britain's economy and warns apathy could lead to another 5 years of the Conservatives. And back to the United States for news about President Biden, where it's being reported his family has urged him not to stand aside, despite pressure from within the Democratic Party to allow someone else to become the Democratic nominee. It comes after his performance in a televised debate last week, which was widely criticised and has reignited concerns over his suitability to do the job in relation to his age. And football, England's Jude Bellingham is being investigated over a gesture he made during England's win over Slovakia in the Euros last night. The England footballer is facing a probe over the potential breach of basic rules of decent conduct at the Euro 2024. We'll give you more details on that, of course, at the top of the hour. That's your latest GB News. I'm Polly Middlehurst, and I'm back in half an hour. See you then.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Polly. Now, if you want to get in touch with us here at GB News, simply go to gbnews.com/your say, and I'll read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There will be some dry and at times sunny weather around as we go into tomorrow, but there's also going to be quite a bit of cloud for some of us and some outbreaks of rain, all due to a frontal system that is marching its way southeastwards currently. That's already brought a bit of rain across northern parts and will continue to bring some rain across many parts of England and Wales as we go through the rest of today. In the southeast, clinging onto the dry weather well into the overnight period, but then things are going to turn a bit cloudy and a bit damp here as we go through the night. Further west, some clear skies are going to develop overnight, but temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Most places holding up in double digits, particularly mild towards the east of England where we have that thicker cloud. So in the east and southeast, it is going to be a bit of a grey, damp start to the day tomorrow. If we take a closer look, and you can see some drizzly rain around, nothing particularly heavy here. Further west, a brighter picture, some sunny spells, a few showers perhaps for North Wales and northwest England. Mostly dry for Northern Ireland and much of northeastern England and eastern Scotland, but further west over western parts of Scotland, some fairly frequent showery rain quite likely here, perhaps the odd heavier burst, and some slightly blustery winds here, whilst elsewhere the winds don't look particularly strong. As we go through the day itself tomorrow, that rain cloud in the southeast will clear away and so turning drier here, but otherwise some bright sunny spells for most of us, a bit brighter, sunnier than today generally. However, towards the northwest of the UK, some more persistent showery rain will push its way in and a few showers are possible elsewhere. Temperatures similar to today, but in the southeast where we cling on to a bit more cloud, it may feel a little bit cooler. More rain piling its way in across northern parts as we go through tomorrow evening. Further south though, staying dry as we go through the end of the day. There could even be some late sunshine around. As we go through the rest of the week, some more changeable weather to come, particularly on Wednesday and Friday, and temperatures generally around or a little bit below average.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, hello again to you. I'm Jules Buckley. Still some queues in South Lanarkshire for the southbound M74 this afternoon. Now the stretch between Larkhall, that's junction 7, and Candyside at junction 8 is a 2-lane stretch. One of the lanes is coned off, so queuing for 20 minutes. Back to Hamilton junction 6 for ongoing emergency repairs. North Yorkshire southbound A1M, a 4-mile queue. Lane 1's coned off just after Allerton Park at junction 47. There's a collision there. Eastbound M62, a lane out for a breakdown just from Brighouse 25 to Chainbar 26. That's slow going, as is the M5 either side of Bridgewater, junction 24 to 23. Northbound, patchy queues back before 25 at Taunton. Southbound congestion snakes back towards Weston-super-Mare, junction 21. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 4:38. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, back to our top story now. With their talk of a Labour supermajority, we've been asking today, have the Conservatives given up? Well, let's put that question to the Policing Minister, Chris Philp, who joins me now. Chris, welcome to the show. England last night, Chris, they were 67 seconds from disaster. It took a spectacular overhead bicycle kick from Jude Bellingham to avoid that impending doom. Can Rishi Sunak perform the equivalent of that last gasp winner, or are the Tories simply getting the red card on Thursday?
Well, good afternoon, Martin. Well, I saw the game last night and the incredible overhead kick. And of course, anything is possible in politics as in football. But clearly the polls are pointing to the danger, the very real danger of a Starmageddon supermajority where Starmer and his Labour Party candidates get an enormous majority, which will mean he can then go and do whatever he wants in Parliament, because there won't be any prospect of him losing a parliamentary vote. And that means things like the tax rises that are inevitable under Labour will end up getting rammed through. They've told us about £8 billion of tax rises. We know their funding commitments mean they're going to cost every working family an extra £2,000 a year over the next Parliament, rather, £2,000 per working family. And they have not given any commitment on things like capital gains tax that you pay on your primary residence, stamp duty, inheritance tax, and pension relief that so many pensioners benefit from. All of those things are going to be on the table if Starmer gets in. And if he does have this supermajority, which the polls unfortunately indicate is forecast, that will be bad news for working people and pensioners up and down the country. But let's hope, therefore, that the overhead kick from outside the penalty area, or maybe nearer the 6-yard box, can be pulled off in the next few days.
Do you think, Chris, that such talk of Starmageddon, of supermajorities, of blank cheques, of generations of power, it all feels a bit Project Fear? It all feels a bit 2016. It didn't work then. And why do you think it's going to work now? Don't you think people want some more optimism rather than this is just shy of a plague of locusts taking over the land?
Well, unfortunately, the opinion polls indicate that the supermajority, or the Starmageddon landslide, is a very real danger. Anyone can look at an opinion poll and see those forecasts of the gigantic Labour majorities, which would give him, Keir Starmer, the ability to do whatever he wanted in Parliament. But there certainly is optimism on our side of the debate. You know, we're talking about getting taxes down, like the national insurance cut that's put £900 a year into the average working person's pocket already this year, and we're going to go further, cutting it more if we get elected. We've already legislated to cut immigration by 300,000 a year. That's been done already, and we're pledging, if we get re-elected, to have a legally binding annual cap set by Parliament that will go down and down and down. So, yeah, there are some examples of some of the ideas we've got to make the future better. Backing our armed forces, 2.5% of GDP spent on defence by 2030. That's a pledge the Labour Party haven't matched. We said we're going to keep a triple lock, not just keep it for pensioners, but increase the tax-free threshold for pensioners by the same amount, so pensioners never pay income tax on their basic state pension, by raising the threshold for pensioners, something Labour aren't going to do. So straight off the bat there are 5 or 6 positive ideas for the future. But if Starmer gets a landslide majority, not only will none of that happen, but he will get on with the tax rises that he has in mind, and it'll cost every working family £2,000 over the next Parliament.
Chris Philp, one of the areas where Rishi Sunak and the Conservative Party in general have been very critical of the Labour Party and Keir Starmer is on immigration. And yet today, Chris Philp, we had the news come in, 4,000 illegal immigrants have crossed the channel in small dinghies since the day the general election was called. 5 key pledges, one of them was to stop the boats. Rishi Sunak can't stop the boats any more than he can stop the tide, can he?
Well, I think he can, because the Rwanda plan is ready to go. If we get re-elected, the first plane will take off before the end of July. And we know that the deterrent effect works. And we know that because the Australians did it about 10 odd years ago when they had a similar problem, with a similar scale, actually, perhaps even slightly bigger scale, with people crossing by boats from Indonesia towards Australia. They had a plan like Rwanda. It involved a place called Nauru, and they, within a matter of months, completely stopped those boats by sending people to Nauru instead of letting them stay in Australia. We did a similar deal with Albania about 1.5 years ago, and before that was done, the Albanians were the largest proportion of people crossing the channel. And when we got that returns agreement set up with Albania, so that if someone from Albania came over the channel, they basically got sent straight back. In a very short space of time, the number of Albanian migrants on those boats came down by about 94%. So these return removal agreements do work. It's ready to go. But if Starmer gets elected, if the Labour Party win on Thursday, he has said he's going to chuck that plan straight in the bin. and the only deterrent we have is going to be destroyed, and that is what is at stake in this election on Thursday. Because without the Conservatives getting back in, Rwanda won't happen.
OK, Chris Philp, the Policing Minister, thank you very much for joining us here on GB News. Thanks for your company. Thank you. Now, still to come after that dismal performance from Gareth Southgate's men yesterday. Despite that victory, I'm going to speak to former England star Trevor Stevens for his take on the Three Lions. Will they bring it home, or will they once again simply come home on an early flight? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This election night, we're putting on a party.
And you are invited.
We'll be here with you.
Following all the twists and turns.
As well as all the live reaction from our election night watch party.
With our GB News lineup.
And as morning breaks, we'll be here with breakfast from 6 a.m.
As it becomes clear who the winners and the losers really are.
Vote 2024.
Thursday, the 4th of July.
Only on GB News,
Britain's election channel.
Britain's Newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
He fell into a coma. His family, of course, absolutely distraught. Because Turkey is outside the European Union, it therefore doesn't count under the Global Health Insurance Card scheme, which means that he is liable for these costs, and the family say that he's being held there for until they pay at least half the £41,000 that is owed.
One of our viewers here saying their premium, because they have health conditions, can be as much as £1,000. But if they're going to go overseas to, as you say, a non-EU country, they still should take it. That's the message here, isn't it? Don't take the risk.
Absolutely. Now, if you do have lots of pre-existing medical conditions, or you're an older person, my lovely mother-in-law is going to be 95 this week. She's still travelling, but only within Europe, and only because the cost of insurance is going to be many times the cost of the trip. And she just thinks, OK, well, I'll get emergency medical treatment free if I'm in the European Union and I've got that GHIC card. But beyond that, absolutely not. It's not worth the risk.
You have to have your card, do you, Simon, to get treatment within the EU? You should just apply for that online.
You should certainly apply for it online. Don't go to any of the scam sites that want to charge you money for it, because it's a free card. But actually, if you haven't, it's absolutely not a huge problem. Yes, you have to go through a bit of rigmarole, or at least your family do, to sort it out. But in general, if you go to a public hospital, they will treat you first and ask questions later in the European Union. And if you're a British resident, you should get it for free. Even if you forgot to get the GHIC card, they will sort it out eventually.
Britain's election channel. GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates.
You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:48. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, England scraped through to the quarterfinals by the skin of their collective teeth last night against the minnows of Slovakia. Jude Bellingham rescued England right at the death in the 95th minute to take the game to extra time. And then Captain Fantastic Harry Kane headed early in extra time to quickly dismiss any threat of penalties. Well, mercy for that. Well, joining me now to discuss this is the former England footballer Trevor Stevens. Trev, welcome to the show. Well, when we spoke last week, as you know, I was pretty pessimistic about our chances. You told me to stop being so negative. You told me to keep the belief, to keep the flag flying. Trevor, it seems like your positive mindset paid off, because I think it's one of the most miserable games of football I've ever seen England play. And yet, we must believe in miracles, and that's what we got.
Yeah, we did in the end. I mean, Gareth Southgate was literally
staring down the barrel, wasn't he? You know, into the added on time after the first initial 90 minutes. And you're absolutely right. We scraped through. We rescued the game literally from nothing, because we didn't look at all as if we were a collective team again. But we might have known that. You know, if you look at the selection, we were all expecting some shake-up of the team, but we didn't get it from Gareth Southgate. We had the same setup that we had in previous games. And opposition just knows how to close us down and block our spaces, and we can't get out from defence. We're not being able to play through the different areas on the field very well at all. And the disappointment was the selection, first and foremost, for me. It just seemed as if it was a negative. We were just going to try and do what we did in the end, but we were so lucky to do it, weren't we?
Yeah, and against Slovakia as well. I mean, hardly a mighty team. And for so much of that first and second half, Trev, the goalkeeper had the most touches. Pickford was knocking it sideways. When are we going to push forward? And no tactical changes came. Way past the hour mark, Trevor Stephen, people were saying, where's Grealish? Where's Rashford? Where are the flair players? In the end, the change came, but is it going to be enough? We were seconds away from Gareth Southgate going through the trapdoor, surely, and being sacked. But let's cast our minds back, Trevor, to 1990. We had a terrible group stage. We had that miraculous goal from David Platt against Belgium, and the rest is history. We pushed on and became legends. Can we do the same thing? Do you still have that belief, Trevor, or is there something more fundamentally flawed about the rudiments of Gareth Southgate's England squad?
Well, the problem we have is if we go out with the same formation, we're going to get the same result. And it's not, for me, so much about the individual players. It's about the actual where they're playing on the field. And that has to change. If it doesn't change, as I said, we'll get the same outcome. So I'm looking for a radical change in Gareth's thinking and selection for this next starting 11. And that means going away from this 4-2-3-1, which just doesn't work for us, and particularly Kieran Trippier in left back. And again, it's not Kieran's fault. He's a right-footed left back, and every time he gets the ball, he steps inside or takes a step back, and the opposition just closes down. So we need to change that. And I was an advocate for Saka to go and play left back. For a one-off, it might just be the way that we go ahead, because that will also allow Cole Palmer to get into the team. So there's so many options. I've heard so many people today, you know, throwing in their six pennies worth of an idea, and many of them are plausible, but they're all different from what Gareth Southgate is doing. That's the principal thing.
Do you think, though, you mentioned there radical thinking and Gareth Southgate in the same sentence? Is that possible, Trevor? I mean, here's a guy that just played with all the flair of a guy managing a spreadsheet, not a team of individual brilliant players.
Well, you know, when you look at some of the players that we have in the starting players, if it's Foden, if it's Bellingham, if it's Kane, Declan Rice not had any impact at all really on the tournament. They've all disappeared into this mire of a poor setup. And I feel for the players, because they've been asked to play this and, you know, just doggedly going around, you know, trying to get in some kind of rhythm in the game. And we've not been able to do it. So therefore, we have to change that. And how are we going to change it? We just need to change personnel for a start. You saw Kobe Mainoo coming on while starting the game, and he looked as if he had been playing international football for years and years. He was so comfortable and smooth about everything he was doing. Yet some of the more experienced players are really feeling the heat. They are feeling the pressure of the moment. They are feeling frustrated, I feel, by the formation that they're in, because they know that they're not enjoying themselves. They are struggling to get through the games at this moment in time. I just think fresh players come in, give us that energy at the start of the game. And the guys who have been there in the early matches can come on at some point in the game and use their experience, just taking a step back, you know, from the starting lineup. So anyway, I'm just hoping that Gareth's got an open mind to what he does next.
OK, we've got to leave it there. Trevor Stephen, maybe it's time for you to dust off your boots. I've heard of worse ideas. I've got a funny feeling we might all go cuckoo against the Swiss in the next round. Now, coming up, we're discussing a shocking new report that's showing that over 80 killers, rapists and violent criminals in one hospital alone, including triple Nottingham knife killer Valdo Calicani, are legally entitled to benefits. Can you believe it? They get benefits. I'll be joined by a campaigner whose dad was stabbed to death, who wants this inhumane law totally changed. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. National weather with Alex Burkill.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There will be some dry and at times sunny weather around as we go into tomorrow, but there's also going to be quite a bit of cloud for some of us and some outbreaks of rain, all due to a frontal system that is marching its way southeastwards currently. That's already brought a bit of rain across northern parts and will continue to bring some rain across many parts of England and Wales as we go through the rest of today. In the southeast, clinging onto the dry weather well into the overnight period, but then things are going to turn a bit cloudy and a bit damp here as we go through the night. Further west, some clear skies are going to develop overnight, but temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Most places holding up in double digits, particularly mild towards the east of England where we have that thicker cloud. So in the east and southeast, it is going to be a bit of a grey, damp start to the day tomorrow. If we take a closer look, and you can see some drizzly rain around, nothing particularly heavy here. Further west, a brighter picture, some sunny spells, a few showers perhaps for North Wales and northwest England. Mostly dry for Northern Ireland and much of northeastern England and eastern Scotland, but further west over western parts of Scotland, some fairly frequent showery rain quite likely here, perhaps the odd heavier burst, and some slightly blustery winds here, whilst elsewhere the winds don't look particularly strong. As we go through the day itself tomorrow, that rain cloud in the southeast will clear away and so turning drier here, but otherwise some bright sunny spells for most of us, a bit brighter, sunnier than today generally. However, towards the northwest of the UK, some more persistent showery rain will push its way in and a few showers are possible elsewhere. Temperatures similar to today, but in the southeast where we cling on to a bit more cloud, it may feel a little bit cooler. More rain piling its way in across northern parts as we go through tomorrow evening. Further south though, staying dry as we go through the end of the day. There could even be some late sunshine around. As we go through the rest of the week, some more changeable weather to come, particularly on Wednesday and Friday, and temperatures generally around or a little bit below average.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Well, problems in South Lanarkshire continue on the M74. The outside lane on that two-lane stretch closed off junctions 7 to 8 just south of Larkhall. Those emergency repair works are still taking place following an accident this morning. In North Yorkshire on the A1M, the inside lane is free, closed southbound just after junction 47, the A59 Allerton Park exit at the scene of a crash, leaving 5 miles of queues behind. In Greater Manchester, the A58 York Street is closed through Hayward, where emergency services remain on scene of a serious fire incident this morning. In Surrey, Claremont Lane at Esher is closed for accident investigation work just off the A3. And in Devon, the A38 remains shut northwest of Totnes. A car is overturned between South Brent and Buckfastleigh. And Tyne-and-Wear Metro services are suspended Kingston Park to Newcastle Metro. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest cash prize of the year so far. With an extra £30,000 in your bank account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For a chance to win £30,000 £30,000 in tax-free cash? Text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's TRIC Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show now, there are only 3 days to go until the general election. Yippee, I hear you cry. Yet, with endless Conservative talks of supermajorities, blank cheques and a generation of Labour power, today I'm asking, have the Tories simply given up? Next, a shocking new report has shown that over 80 killers, rapists and violent criminals in one secure hospital alone, including triple Nottingham knife killer Valdo Calacone, are legally entitled to government benefits. I'll be joined by a campaigner whose dad was stabbed to death, who wants this inhumane law changed. And watch out, Nigels, Garys and even Martins, because a new report shows a whole host of names of a certain vintage are slowly dying out. Also, we'll reveal how the most popular names in Britain paints a picture of a rapidly changing cultural country. That's all coming up in your next hour. Well, the show, always a delight to have your company. Just 3 days left to go. Are you one of those apathetic voters who can't be bothered with any of it? Are you going to stay on your sofa? Well, the Conservatives certainly think that may be the case. This talk of a supermajority, they're hoping will make the Labour Party stay at home. Meanwhile, Starmageddon, they hope will encourage their voters to get out, but so much has changed. Nigel Farage has entered the fray. The Liberal Democrats are bungee hooking their way to votes. Ed Davey earlier on was in a donut in a bay in Cornwall. Quite an election it's been, only 3 more days to go. Meanwhile, Donald Trump was partially cleared, of immunity. All to play for in America. Meanwhile, over in France, Le Pen could be getting into power. What will all of this mean for Britain and our place in world power? Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. But now's your headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Good evening. At just after 5 o'clock, the main story this hour comes from the United States, where the Supreme Court has ruled that former presidents are immune from prosecution for some actions taken while in office. The decision throws out a judicial decision that rejected Donald Trump's bid to shield himself from criminal charges related to his attempt to overturn his 2020 election loss. Today's decision means that former presidents can be immune for actions taken within their constitutional authority, but not for actions they may take in a private capacity. That's the first time since the 18th century the court has found that presidents can be shielded from criminal charges. Well, here in the UK, the Prime Minister has said Britain would become the soft touch of Europe on illegal migration under a Labour government. He says flights to Rwanda are an essential deterrent for illegal migrants coming to Britain and warns other parties have failed to put forward credible alternatives.
It is a deterrent. It's very simple. I don't think illegal migrants should get to stay in our country. They should be removed to a safe alternative. That is the only way to stop people coming in the first place. That's what you'll get if I'm your Prime Minister. A vote for anyone else just means that we are going to become the soft touch of Europe when it comes to illegal migration. We've had two debates head-to-head, and anyone who's watched them would have seen that Keir Starmer just simply can't answer the question, what would he do with illegal migrants that come to our country? He doesn't have a plan. I have a plan.
Meanwhile, political parties are appealing to undecided voters in the final days before Thursday's election. Rishi Sunak is urging people not to give Labour a so-called supermajority amid polls giving Sir Keir Starmer a 20-point lead. But the Labour leader says a clear mandate is needed to repair Britain's economy, and he's warned apathy could lead to another 5 years of the Conservatives.
This has to be a summer of change. That's our one job this summer, a summer of change. And so whether you're a family that's been struggling with the cost of living crisis for months and years on end with bills bearing down on you, whether you're a business that's struggled because of the damage that's been done to the economy, or whether you've served your country in uniform or in your community, then this campaign, this positive Labour campaign, is for you, and the fight for change is for you.
The actor Sir Ian McKellen has pulled out of the national tour of his West End production, Player Kings. In a statement, he said that after receiving medical advice, he's decided to step aside from the play with what he called the greatest reluctance. It comes after the veteran actor fell off the stage during a recent performance at the Noel Coward Theatre in London's West End. He assures ticket holders that his replacement and Robert Icke's production remain as dazzling as ever. Now, as you've been hearing, in France, the populist right-wing National Rally Party has taken more than 30% of the national vote in the country's snap election. That puts it on the cusp of forming a government. The first round of voting is a huge setback for President Macron, whose centrist Alliance Party trailed in third place with just 20%. If the current momentum continues, it could see the populist right-wing party, led by Marine Le Pen, rise to power for the first time since the Second World War. The final outcome will depend on days of negotiations, though, between the parties before next week's runoff vote, though many analysts are now saying there's likely to be a hung parliament in France. Here in the UK, house prices were up by 0.2% in June as higher mortgage rates kept many people off the property ladder. That means the average cost of a home across the UK is just over £266,000, which is 1.5% more than last year. According to the index by Nationwide, earnings growth has performed better than the property market in recent years, but it hasn't been enough to offset the recent spike in mortgage costs. And just a word about England's squad, Jude Bellingham at least. He's now being investigated over a gesture he made during England's win over Slovakia in the Euros last night. The England footballer facing a probe over a potential breach of the basic rules of decent conduct, they're saying, at UEFA in the Euro 2024. It's understood to relate to Bellingham, if I might say, grabbing his crotch after scoring England's equaliser in the added time of the match. Harry Kane, of course, going on to score another goal in extra time, securing England's win. Those are the latest GB News headlines, for now at least. I'm Polly Middlehurst. I'm back in half an hour. See you then.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Polly. Now, the main political parties continue to ramp up their general election campaigning with only 3 days left to convince voters ahead of the polls opening, of course, on Thursday. With the Prime Minister campaigning in very safe Conservative seats and with yet more talk about handing Labour a supermajority, have the Tories simply given up? Well, this is what Mr Sunak had to say when asked that precise question earlier today.
Absolutely not. I'm fighting hard for every vote. I don't take a single place or person for granted. But I don't want Britain to sleepwalk into the danger of what an unchecked Labour government with a supermajority would mean. And that means handing Labour a blank cheque that people won't be able to get back, a blank cheque to put up everyone's taxes, to make us a soft touch of Europe when it comes to migration, to reverse my cost-saving net zero reforms, and to ensure pensioners pay a tax for the first time in our country's history on the state pension. I don't want that to happen. So I want to talk to as many people as possible about the choice at this election. A vote for the Conservatives, a vote to have your voice heard. I will fight for you, I will stand up for you, and crucially, continue to cut your taxes.
Well, I'm joined now in our studio in Westminster by GB News' political correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, welcome to the show. You've been out on the campaign trail with the Labour Party today. Before we get to that, let's talk about the Conservatives. Now, the gambling odds on this, because I know a few Conservatives out there like a flutter, are astonishing. Labour are now 500 to 1 on to win the most seats. So that means 500 quid down, you get £1 back, 150 to 1 on to get a majority. To use a football metaphor, because last night we had a bit of a match on, is there any possibility of a 95th minute overhead bicycle kick that could save Rishi Sunak from the fate that seemed to be facing Gareth Southgate in the face? Can the Tories turn this around, or is it simply, you think, time for them to get shown the red card?
I think it is incredibly unlikely that the Tories are going to be able to turn this round by Thursday, barring some, enormous scandal within the Labour Party. It does look almost certain that Keir Starmer is going to be our next Prime Minister in Downing Street on Friday. You can see from what Rishi Sunak was saying there that even he knows, really, that the game is up. He's talking up this idea of a supermajority, a Labour supermajority, and he says that he's worried about that, about Labour being able to get through whatever they like. Now, interestingly, I've spoken to Conservative activists who've been campaigning, and that is a line that goes down really well with Conservative-minded voters on the doorstep. They know that the Conservatives aren't going to win the election, but when they're told, well, hang on a minute, don't you want the Conservatives to at least have a powerful opposition to stop Labour getting through its most extreme policies? That actually persuades Conservative voters to go and vote Conservative on polling day. So weirdly, the Conservatives are in this position where actually the most compelling reason to vote Conservatives isn't to try and get the Conservative government to win or to get any of their manifesto policies through. It's simply to try and put a block on Labour. Labour is quite nervous about this supermajority talk. I've been speaking to Labour activists today. I've been out on the Labour campaign trail. They hate the talk of a supermajority because they are worried, and you can see why, that Labour voters in safe Labour seats simply won't bother to go and vote on polling day if they think that it's a done deal. Keir Starmer was talking today, he was comparing these last few days as the final miles of a marathon. He wants to make sure, he says that this is the really, really hard bit, making sure that everyone who is minded to vote Labour actually turns up on polling day. And to be quite honest, you can completely see why he is thinking that way. With all of this talk, with all of this almost certainty, with the odds as they are, why, if you were a Labour voter in a safe Labour seat, would you bother? There is a lot of complacency going on among Labour Party voters at the moment.
And yet, Olivia, whatever the messaging has been throughout this entire campaign, these polls have stayed stubbornly flat in terms of the Conservative vote share, still ticking along about 19-20%. There's a poll out this morning saying the Tories are going to be all but wiped out in London. Reform on 11%. Reform on third place in London. It doesn't seem that whatever has shifted the dial. And another grim statistic came in today, Olivia. 4,000 illegal immigrants have now crossed the Channel. In small thing is, since the general election was called, another metric that can be measured, another damning statistic for Rishi Sunak.
A hugely damaging statistic for Rishi Sunak. It was a bit of a question in Westminster over why Rishi Sunak chose to call this general election early. And personally, my best answer to that question was always that he was worried. Obviously, the Rwanda plan had failed to actually take off. No flights had literally taken off from the runway. It didn't look like it was going to get going anytime soon. And And I always thought that Rishi called the election now because he was worried that come the autumn or the winter, you would have had a whole summer full of migrants coming over in those small boats, and the numbers would look even worse than they did this time a year ago. But, I mean, he hasn't really managed to avoid or mitigate that catastrophe because, as you say, the numbers are already going up. We're already well into summer now, even though it doesn't really feel like it today. And we know that in those summer months it is much, much easier for migrants to cross the channel in small boats, and they do so in much larger numbers. So Rishi Sunak is already facing the fallout from that. And, you know, this is one area where the Conservatives should be strong. Rishi Sunak has actually made leaps and bounds in stopping those small boats. He came up with the Rwanda policy. He has pushed it through Parliament. He's also made a deal with the Albanian Prime Minister, which has got down Albanian immigration down by 70%. It's a much more coherent plan than Labour's plan for combating illegal migration. But unfortunately, Rishi Sunak isn't really able to use that argument because the numbers speak for themselves.
Yeah, thank you, Olivia Utley, for coming back to Westminster from the campaign trail with the Labour Party. Thank you very much for joining us here in the studio. Now, moving on, French right-winger Marine Le Pen has declared her party as practically wiped out. Emmanuel Macron, after a decisive victory in the first round of voting in France's snap election. Le Pen's party, National Rally, has received around 34% of the vote, while President Macron's coalition have crashed into third with a dismal 21%. Well, let's find out more from Paris-based journalist Peter Allen. So, Peter, this election was called by Macron in response to a terrible set of election results from the European Union election. Has his gamble spectacularly backfired?
It's certainly backfired, I think, Martin. There's no doubt about that at all. As you say, 3 weeks ago, he was very unhappy because the National Rally of Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella had achieved 32% in European elections. They won, clearly, seats in the European Parliament for that. But the French people weren't particularly bothered either way, really, I have to say about that. European elections aren't hugely important to the French, but domestic elections are. And what Emmanuel Macron hoped would happen would be that huge vote for the National Rally in Europe would be tested domestically. And he was thinking that people would say, look, we had a vote in Europe, it wasn't that important, but these are domestic elections, we're potentially choosing a new government, so we'll take these a lot seriously and perhaps not vote for the National Rally. What did they do? In their millions, they voted for the National Rally. So that's a huge humiliation for Macron and very risky indeed for Macron, because potentially in a week's time, if they get a majority in the National Assembly, they could potentially give Macron his next Prime Minister and indeed ministers, in which case you would have the National Rally playing a very, very important part in government for the first time in their history. That's something that Emmanuel Macron always said he didn't want. When he came to power in 2017, he said, if I have one job, it's to keep the far right, they are his words, out of power. And here we are, 2024, and they've got a good chance of moving into power, Martin.
And so what that means now, Peter, is that Macron will be horse trading as furiously as he possibly can in the background to form alliances, to form strategic resistance to Le Pen getting in. That, though, Peter Allen, carries its own set of risks. Some of those left-wingers want billions of euros in tax increases so people can retire earlier. They want 4-day weeks, all kinds of stuff that could throw the French economy into absolute chaos.
Yes, and the markets are responding to that. The CAC, which is equivalent to the FTSE, that's well down since all this started. And there's talk of businesses moving out of France, all the things you normally get when there's a possibility of political chaos in a country. And all those things are possible. It's a hugely complicated voting system that's going into place this week. Nobody can really know what the how the seats configuration is going to end up. If we end up with cohabitation, that is a president ruling with a prime minister he potentially detests. It could be the National Rally. He certainly detests the National Rally. He doesn't want them in power. But as you quite rightly say, it could also be a far left majority. That is possible. They polled pretty well over the weekend. They won about 28% of the vote. That's not that far behind the National Rally. So potentially they could form a majority party, in which case, again, Emmanuel Macron might have to choose a far-left prime minister like Jean-Luc Mélenchon, for example. A Marxist, really, a lot of his policies. Economically, they want to pour billions into projects, uncosted projects. And there's huge worry about that happening. I have to say, the National Rally's got some pretty expensive economic policies as well, tucked up its sleeve. So on both sides, the fears of an extremist government coming in and bankrupting the country. There's no doubt about that at all, Martin.
Peter, can I ask you a quick question about what this may mean for the United Kingdom? Just say Sir Keir Starmer is our next Prime Minister on Friday morning. Just say Le Pen becomes the Premier in France. Sir Keir Starmer has made a huge deal out of the fact he'll get a new deal with France to return asylum seekers. But Le Pen's immigration policy makes Nigel Farage look like a moderate. There's no way that she'll want to do such a deal with England, is there?
No doubt about that at all. I mean, one thing the National Rally are not is friendly with other countries, even neighbouring countries like Britain. The Entente Cordiale means very, very little to them. The National Rally bigwigs I've met and interviewed for many, many years, they never express any interest in Britain at all. They want to do their own thing. They're a nationalistic party, hugely patriotic, xenophobic party, and they'll do what suits them. And any deal that somebody like Keir Starmer offers them, I doubt most of them have even heard of him at this late stage. I mean, that's almost not a joke. Of course, they will if he becomes Prime Minister at the end of this week. But yes, it will be everything up in the air. At the moment, they've got a great Anglophile. Emmanuel Macron has a great deal of interest in Britain, wants to get on with the British. Whatever you say about him, he is quite a diplomat. But I can't see the National Rally having any interest in Britain at all, and everything will be up in the air all over again, Martin.
Well, Peter Allen, if Emmanuel Macron is an Anglophile compared to the rest of them, then wow, we've got some interesting times ahead. Thank you very much for joining us on the show, Peter Allen. Thank you. Now it's time now for the Great British Giveaway, and it's a big one. The chance to win a whopping £30,000 in cash, tax-free. It's our biggest prize to date, and here's how you could bank the lot.
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest cash prize of the year so far. With an extra £30,000 in your bank account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For a chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, coming up, we're discussing a shocking new report that has shown that over 80 killers, rapists and violent criminals in one hospital alone, including triple Nottingham knife killer Valdo Calicani, are legally entitled to claim benefits. I'll be joined in the studio by a campaigner whose dad was stabbed to death, who wants this inhumane law changed. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This election night, we're putting on a party.
And you are invited.
We'll be here with you.
Following all the twists and turns.
As well as all the live reaction from our election night watch party.
With our GB News lineup.
And as morning breaks, we'll be here with breakfast from 6 a.m.
As it becomes clear who the winners and the losers really are.
Vote 2024.
Thursday, the 4th of July.
Only on GB News.
Britain's election channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
So, question is, what can we do to get young people to eat healthy food? Here's dietitian and nutrition consultant Helen Bond. Helen, what do you think?
eating habits formed at this age tend to persist into later life. We know we're eating too much fat, sugar, salt, and not enough of the good things like fibre, fruits and vegetables, all of those things. So yes, we need to help this age group so they have the skill set and they have the nutrition knowledge to take that forward.
Do you agree that it is impossible to eat healthily on a budget and quickly as well, or do you have any sort of fail-safe, affordable and very quick to prep meals that you'd recommend youngsters try?
It doesn't have to be expensive either, but you have to have those kind of cost-cutting hacks and those time-consaving things in the kitchen. Make use, I always say, of things like peas, beans and lentils, which are a type of pulse, very inexpensive compared to meat, and yet they double up as one of your 5 a day, and also a great source of plant-based protein. If you overget a milk as something, you have too much milk, maybe make some lattes.
I just wanted to throw a shoe at the TV, really, because was there nothing else on or nothing else available? The point being, there is an audience, there's obviously an appeal, there's obviously people are watching this stuff. So what are they doing? Are they watching and not cooking?
I think that's it. They're watching and maybe enjoying all the cookery programmes like I do. And I'm a typical person in the kitchen. I must have about 100 cookbooks. But sometimes when you are time poor, you've got to feed a family or you've got to feed yourself and everything, you don't really know where to start. And I think that's why apps and having things online for this younger audience makes it much more accessible. Start with one recipe and build it up from there. Like I said,
The People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This election night, we're putting on a party.
And you are invited.
We'll be here with you.
Following all the twists and turns.
As well as all the live reaction from our election night watch party.
With our GB News lineup.
And as morning breaks, we'll be here with breakfast from 6 a.m.
As it becomes clear who the winners and the losers really are.
Vote 2024.
Thursday, the 4th of July.
Only on GB News.
Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:25. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, in a shocking revelation, violent prisoners, including the Nottingham triple killer Valdo Calicani, are allowed to claim state benefits. Officers treated as patients, offenders, treated as patients with a mental disorder are eligible for universal credit and employment and support allowance. Now, this policy has sparked outrage and raised questions about the justice system's approach. I'm now joined in the studio by the founder of 100 Families, Julian Henley. Julian, welcome to the studio. Would you mind, mate, if I may, start with the story of your father and how you became involved in campaigning on this?
My dad was killed in Bristol in 2007 by a man with serious mental illness, drug abuse and violence. I was a journalist at the time, investigative journalist. I had 20 years' experience of trying to uncover difficult stories, and I found it was very difficult to find out any information at all about the man who killed my dad. I found that when I rang the Mental Health Trust to say, are you going to do an investigation, they said, who told you there's going to be an investigation? Not, I'm really sorry you killed your dad. And as a result of that, I made a film for the BBC about not only about my case, about other cases, 4 other cases around the country. And I found that very, very similar problems, that victims who are affected by these sorts of cases, which there's 100 to 120 each and every year, don't get any help. They're often left struggling for information, they're struggling for support to help them cope and recover. And that's why I set up the charity 100 Families, after the 100 families each year, to try and support and advocate for them.
And that documentary is very movingly called Why Did You Kill My Dad? I watched a part of that earlier. It's incredibly emotional. You tell how you just heard the story. Your dad was going out to pay his paper bill. That's right. His life was taken.
He was perfectly entitled. We'd lived in that part of Bristol for, he was keen on family history. In fact, our family lived in that part of Bristol for over 200 years, and people were saying, oh, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I thought, No, the man who was in the wrong place at the wrong time was the man who killed him, because his family were warning about his deteriorating mental health and nothing was done to effectively to treat his mental illness and make him safe to be on the streets. And I mean, most of the cases we deal with are people who are seriously unwell, who are unable or unwilling to get good care and treatment. And basically, often we see services saying, oh, they didn't want to engage, they didn't think they were ill, so we'll wash their hands of them. And that seems to me to be entirely negligent, and many of these cases appear to me to be entirely preventable.
And it's entirely to your credit. Your father will be very, very proud, I'm sure, that you've turned your life into campaigning on this issue. Can we turn now to this issue of the entitlement to benefits? People watching this will be absolutely astonished that you can be a triple killer, a violent sex offender, a rapist, and the moment you are put into a secure institution and not a prison, you can claim benefits.
The difference is these are people who are given hospital orders. And if somebody gets a hospital order, if they're seen to be somebody who's dangerous and needs mental health care and treatment, then they're entitled to claim benefits. We even know that if you're in hospital when you have no expenses because your food and lodging is paid for, they're even entitled to cold weather payments. You know, last time I was in the hospital, it's bloody warm, you know. And so I don't understand. It just seems to be a system that is bonkers. You know, our families really struggle to get proper care and treatment. You know, we've seen a lot of families that can't access proper therapy or bereavement counselling. There is not enough support for victim services. There's not enough support for community mental health services. We estimate, and I did the research on this, this is tens of millions of pounds each and every year. And we say that should be much better spent on victim services or better mental health care for people who need it.
And this money accrues in a pot. They're not allowed to spend it where they're inside, so to speak, but the pot can be as high as £100,000 if they're in for a 20-year term, 50 grand for a 10-year term. They're walking out with a taxpayer lump sum.
I mean, the problem is that a lot of people with serious mental illness who commit violence also have drug abuse problems. So if you give somebody with drug abuse problems and mental illness after you release them a huge pot of money, which you've not tested for, that makes them very vulnerable either to exploitation or go and access drugs and make them more vulnerable in the future.
So there's an election coming up. I know you want a political resolution on this. Sir Keir Starmer might be the Prime Minister come Friday morning. He may not. Irrespective of that, Julian Hendy, what would you like to say to politicians watching this now? What do you want to see done about this law that many will feel is grotesquely unfair?
I think I want the new government, whoever it is to take this seriously, to try and look at this properly and to make sure that the monies that seem to me inappropriately given to violent offenders who have no need for it should be given to victims or mental health services in the community to stop these things happening again.
Okay, that's Julian Hendy, the founder of 100 Families. Thank you so much for coming in. Please, if you're watching this show, politicians, listen. This is precisely the sort of thing that makes people's blood boil. It's grotesquely unfair that Julian should lose his father in this capacity and then have to go through the indignity of watching so many thousands of convicted criminals continue to receive state payments. How on earth can that be just? How on earth can that be justice for the bereaved? Julian Hendy, thank you very much for joining us. You're an absolute credit. Thank you. There's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, and I'll be speaking with the Shadow Minister about whether they really do have a plan to stop the boats. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you. The headlines this hour in the United States. The Supreme Court has ruled that former presidents are immune from prosecution for some actions taken while in office. That decision throws out a judicial decision that rejected Donald Trump's bid to shield himself from criminal charges related to his attempt to overturn his 2020 election loss. Well, today's decision means former presidents can be immune for actions taken within their constitutional authority, but not for actions they may take in a private capacity. Donald Trump has described it as a big win for democracy. Meanwhile, President Biden's family has reportedly urged him not to stand aside, despite pressure from within his party to allow someone else to become the Democratic nominee. It comes after his performance in a televised debate last week, which was widely criticised and reignited concerns over his capacity to do the job in relation to his age. Here, the Prime Minister says Britain would become the soft touch of Europe on illegal migration under a Labour government. He says flights to Rwanda are an essential component for illegal migrants coming to Britain and warns that other parties have failed to put forward credible alternatives. He also took aim at Reform UK, saying that the leader, Nigel Farage, hasn't done enough to tackle allegations of racism within his party. Meanwhile, political parties are making their final pitches to undecided voters this week ahead of Thursday's general election voting day. Rishi Sunak is urging people not to give Labour a supermajority amid polls giving Sir Keir Starmer a 20-point lead. But the Labour leader says a clear mandate is needed to repair Britain's economy and warns apathy could lead to another 5 years of the Tories. And the actor Sir Ian McKellen has pulled out of his national tour of the West End production of Player Kings after receiving medical advice. It comes after the veteran actor fell off the stage during a recent performance in the West End. Just lastly, England's Jude Bellingham is being investigated over a gesture he apparently made during England's win over Slovakia in the Euros last night. The footballer's facing a probe over a potential breach of what's being called the basic rules of decent conduct. Those are your latest GB News headlines. I'm Polly Middlehurst, back in half an hour with more.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report. Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you very much, Polly. Now, if you want to get in touch with us here at GB News, simply go to gbnews.com/your say and I'll read out the best of your messages before the end of the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There will be some dry and at times sunny weather around as we go into tomorrow, but there's also going to be quite a bit of cloud for some of us and some outbreaks of rain, all due to a frontal system that is marching its way southeastwards currently. That's already brought a bit of rain across northern parts and will continue to bring some rain across many parts of England and Wales as we go through the rest of today. In the southeast, clinging onto the dry weather well into the overnight period, but then things are going to turn a bit cloudy and a bit damp here as we go through the night. Further west, some clear skies are going to develop overnight, but temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Most places holding up in double digits, particularly mild towards the east of England where we have that thicker cloud. So in the east and southeast, it is going to be a bit of a grey, damp start to the day tomorrow. If we take a closer look, and you can see some drizzly rain around, nothing particularly heavy here. Further west, a brighter picture, some sunny spells, a few showers perhaps for North Wales and northwest England. Mostly dry for Northern Ireland and much of northeastern England and eastern Scotland, but further west over western parts of Scotland, some fairly frequent showery rain quite likely here, perhaps the odd heavier burst, and some slightly blustery winds here, whilst elsewhere the winds don't look particularly strong. As we go through the day itself tomorrow, that rain cloud in the southeast will clear away and so turning drier here, but otherwise some bright sunny spells for most of us, a bit brighter, sunnier than today generally. However, towards the northwest of the UK, some more persistent showery rain will push its way in and a few showers are possible elsewhere. Temperatures similar to today, but in the southeast where we cling on to a bit more cloud, it may feel a little bit cooler. More rain piling its way in across northern parts as we go through tomorrow evening. Further south though, staying dry as we go through the end of the day. There could even be some late sunshine around. As we go through the rest of the week, some more changeable weather to come, particularly on Wednesday and Friday, and temperatures generally around or a little bit below average.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, my name is Johnny Ratner. On the M74 in South Lanarkshire, the motorway is down to a single lane southbound. Everyone's been funnelled into the inside lane on that two-lane stretch from junction 7 to 8 just south of Larkhill off the A71. Emergency repair works are still taking place following an accident. Moving into Greater Manchester now, the A538, the Stamford New Road, that's closed through Altrincham just off the A560 at the scene of a crash. And north of Stafford Town Centre, Beaconside, the A513 closed following an accident. In Surrey, the A244 Claremont Lane has been closed all day in Esher, just north of the A3 for accident investigation work off the High Street. And the M27 in Hampshire is queuing eastbound Junction 5, the Southampton Airport turn-off in the roadworks, not being helped by an earlier accident. There are severe delays on the Elizabeth line in London from Abbey Wood to Whitechapel. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:38. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, the Supreme Court has ruled that while former US President Donald Trump is immune from criminal prosecution for official acts taken in office, he is not immune for unofficial acts. Well, joining me now to discuss this is US political journalist and commentator Laurie Laird. Laurie, welcome to the show. A significant ruling today at the Supreme Court. And just to spell this out for the benefit of our viewers, this removes greatly, does it not, the chances of Donald Trump now being prosecuted ahead of November the 5th. Tell us more.
Without a doubt, I cannot see this case going forward, and it may affect the other cases that Donald Trump is facing. But let's put this in a nutshell. Although you did sum it up pretty well. A lower court back in February ruled that Donald Trump did not have any immunity at all. Now, Donald Trump's lawyers brought this to the Supreme Court, and privately, Martin, they said this was what they called a Hail Mary attempt. It's a term from American football where you're late in the game, you've got to throw a very long pass to try and score, low percentage move. And this is what Donald Trump's lawyers said about taking this appeal all the way to the Supreme Court. Well, they got a pretty good result, and that is, as you said, Donald Trump has immunity from unofficial acts, but not immunity for official acts. Now, what's an unofficial act? What's an official act? That goes back down to a lower court, and the legal wrangling there, I suspect, means that there's no way this will be settled before November.
And Laurie Laird, in a nutshell, they're trying to nail him for the January the 6th, the insurgency, as they called it, the comments he was making about the election. And he will simply claim here, won't he? Well, I made those comments in an official capacity. I made it as the president, QED. I cannot be tried on this. And more to the point, what this now means is, A, that is going to be shoved down the road legally. The lawyers love this kind of vagary. They'll shove everything past November the 5th. And then added to that, Laurie Laird, we can see Donald Trump polling higher since that debate last week. All of this, Laurie Laird, does it not increases the likelihood of Donald Trump becoming the next president of the United States?
Oh, very much so. Look, it's been a very good week for Donald Trump. But I would say Donald Trump supporters would not have been swayed with this decision one way or the other. And also, Martin, I think this is an interesting case. It's a fascinating case, but it's a case that I think absorbs us. Most people outside of Washington, D.C., outside of London, are not that concerned about this. Certainly Donald Trump supporters will say, hey, we expected this all the time. His supporters had a ruling gone in a different way. They would have said, well, that's the legal system biased against Trump. So I don't think this will affect things all that much. It does decrease the chance of Donald Trump being convicted on something again. If this case ever goes to trial, and it may not, if there is a conviction, he could be president. He can pardon himself. So, yeah, this is a very, very good decision for the Trump team. And as you said, after that debate performance last week, things looking real good for Trump, and polling is showing that.
And Laurie, can we talk about this astonishing situation now? The New York Times, a very pro-Biden news outlet, calling for him to stand down for the sake of the country, for the sake of the Democrat Party. People within the Democrat Party themselves going into a tailspin of panic. What's the latest? Seems like the only people out there who are supporting Joe Biden staying on the ticket are his wife and his son.
Absolutely. And apparently there was a big family summit at Camp David, the presidential retreat over the weekend. And the word coming out of that is Joe Biden feels he's fit. His family is supportive. He is going to run again. Now, we're seeing really damning with faint praise from after that terrible debate performance, even from those people who should be, that we would expect would support Joe Biden. I would say if Joe Biden has any thought of stepping down, he's got to do this very, very soon. The convention is coming. The convention is the nominating event. That's when whoever the candidate is, presumably Joe Biden at this point, will be officially nominated to go forward to that November election. That time is drawing near. If there's any thought of bringing in another candidate, it has to happen now. And look, well, succession planning in the Democratic Party has clearly been poor. There's a lot of talent on that Democratic bench. And I think that if the Democrats want to have a chance here, they really need to rethink their strategy.
Well, Laurie Laird, an astonishing twist, yet another astonishing legal twist in what surely promises to be the electoral event of the century, November the 5th. Fireworks night here, and no doubt fireworks night too in America. Laurie Laird, thank you very much. Always a delight to have you on the show. Thank you very much. Now, coming up, I'll be speaking with the Shadow Minister live about whether his party really does have a plan to stop the boats if they win. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com/election party.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In World War I, 309 men from Britain and the Commonwealth never came home because they'd been shot at dawn. The majority were killed for desertion, cowardice and sleeping at post. Appearing at their court-martials and told they'd brought shame on their country, these men had no opportunity to defend themselves and were executed by a firing squad. The National Memorial Arboretum launched a fundraising campaign to restore the memorial, which has stood for more than 20 years.
Thank you to your viewers for their support for the fundraising campaign. And thanks to the generosity of so many people, we've been able to replace all 309 of the posts that represent those young men that were shot in the First World War. Restoration of this really precious memorial.
The centrepiece of the memorial is the young soldier, blindfolded and facing his execution. In September 1916, Private Harry Farr was ordered to the front. Already suffering from shell shock, he was overwhelmed and refused his orders. He was court-martialed, and in a trial lasting only 20 minutes, he was sentenced to death. On the day of his execution, he faced the firing squad without a blindfold. Janet Booth is Private Farr's granddaughter and was part of the public campaign to have those who were shot at dawn officially pardoned.
When I asked my gran, do you know where I could find Harry's grave? And she looked at my mother and there was this sort of look between them, and then she said, well, he hasn't got a grave because they didn't warrant, he deserved one because he was shot as a coward and had let his country down. We can come here as a family and pay our respects to him, and also for all the other families, it's somewhere to come and remember their loved ones.
The People's Channel.
This election night, we're putting on a party.
And you are invited.
We'll be here with you.
Following all the twists and turns.
As well as all the live reaction from our Election Night Watch Party.
With our GB News lineup.
And as morning breaks, we'll be here with breakfast from 6 a.m.
As it becomes clear who the winners and the losers really are.
Vote 2024.
Thursday, the 4th of July.
Only on GB News,
Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:47. I'm now joined by the Shadow Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds. Jonathan, welcome to the show. Let's talk politics, your favourite topic now. Sir Keir Starmer today has been saying this is the final mile. These are the last hard yards. Meanwhile, the Conservatives have been talking about Starmageddon. They've been talking about supermajorities. They've been talking about blank cheques and a generation of Labour power. They've got a bit Project Fear. Are they trying to scare their voters into getting out to vote against you guys? And more to the point, is this supermajority idea, is that trying to make your voters stay at home?
Yeah, good afternoon, Martin. Yeah, I think it's a bit of that. I mean, let's just say what is the truth, which is that there is an election on Thursday. It hasn't been decided yet. Anyone could win that election, any outcome is possible. There is a clear set of differences between Labour and the Conservatives. That will be where the next government comes from. So if people want more of the same, they've got the Conservative Party. And if they want change, they can vote for Labour. I sincerely hope people will vote for change. Let's also be clear that there is no such thing as a supermajority. These are American political terms, a little bit desperate from the Conservative Party, trying to invent new things. If people want change, they've got to give the government that would be the change a mandate for that. And particularly when it comes to getting infrastructure built, getting homes built, getting more money into schools and the NHS, we would like a mandate for that. So if people want it, please vote for us. And if you want more of the same, it's Rishi Sunak and the Conservative Party who will offer that more of the same. It's a clear choice, but nothing's decided yet.
One thing Jonathan Reynolds, Conservatives, have been saying, and a lot of people who email us here at GB News have been saying, if you want more of the same on immigration, it doesn't matter who you vote for, because you haven't got a plan. The same of the Conservatives say they've got a plan, but nothing's worked. Today, 4,000 the mark was reached of those coming over the channel in small boats since the general election was called. And Sir Keir Starmer doesn't seem to have any plan other than the vague notion of let's smash the gangs. We've been trying that for years. And what about the fact that Marine Le Pen might be getting into power in France? Any talk of a deal with the French, with Le Pen, is for the birds. They won't want to do a deal with you guys. They want to get rid of as many of their illegal immigrants as they can.
Well, look, first of all, there is a big difference. And let's just be honest, immigration's got to come down, both legal and illegal. You can recognise that whilst recognising people make a huge contribution when they come legally to the UK to work. But frankly, it's high and it's reasonable to want that to come down. Specifically on illegal immigration. I mean, look, the reason we oppose the Rwanda scheme that the government put forward, and that is a big change, big difference between the political parties, is even if it worked, and that's a big if, it would affect 1% of the people who've come here illegally. That's the best case scenario. So it's a gimmick, and people can see a con when they're being offered it. We would take the huge amount of money that has been put into that and still needs to go into that to get anywhere near those Conservative plans, and we would spend it instead, first of all, on tackling the criminal basis of this disgusting treatment of individuals, bringing them across the channel in this way. But we would also make sure that we don't just leave 99% of the people that this affects in hotels indefinitely. We're going to process those claims. If people shouldn't be in the UK, they will have to go back to where they have come from. And if they do have the right to be in the UK, if we're right to offer them amnesty, asylum, if that is the right thing for them, they've got a legitimate claim, then you integrate those people. You don't then have the huge costs of those hotel costs we've got at the minute. So it's a big difference. I think, Martin, it's a difference between a real plan and a gimmick.
OK, we've heard that plan now, Jonathan, for a long time. We understand that the broad brushstrokes. What are the Labour Party's immigration targets? Can you give us a number? Just give us something concrete to go off.
You can't on legal immigration, Martin, because it depends on the strength of your economy. But we have said we would tie that much more closely to the skills and training system. There's a big set of changes we put forward when it comes to things like the apprenticeship levy and how that could be used more differently. If you
what
take,
about legal migration? Can you give us a target on legal migration? We're looking at 750, 650,000 at the moment, an astonishing amount. These are like entire cities per year. Can you at least give us some indication of how many you get that down? What, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands? What's the figure?
Well, I wouldn't put a figure on it, partly because I've seen a lot of Conservative PMs put a figure on it and fail to deliver. I think that makes people quite rightly pretty cynical about it. I do think it needs to come down. I say that as someone who's always prepared to defend the benefits people bring to the UK when they come to work. But I think it's historically high, and we can recognise that is, to have, for instance, the lowest level of house building and the highest level of immigration, that is a problem, and I think it's fair to recognise that and to say that. Under our plans, we will be far less...
Can I just say, I just want some clarity on this, Jonathan Reynolds, because Angela Rayner last week said that every area, every constituency in the UK will have to take its fair share of asylum seekers. That's a European Union-style plan of dispersal. People don't vote for that. They want to control our borders. They've consistently voted to get immigration down, electoral cycle after electoral cycle. And now you're saying you're different. I'm asking you for a number. You can't give it. People watching this might think, well, you're just more of the same.
No, look, I can't give it because it's not possible to give it, and where people have given it, it hasn't been true, has it? So let's have some honesty and frankness in politics rather than people making stuff up, Martin, that they can't possibly deliver on. I think it needs to come down. I'm confident we can bring it down. Why is that? Because our changes to the skills system, and particularly recognising the flexibilities business need to make sure not every solution to a skills or a labour shortage is bringing people into the UK. Of course, that is consistent with recognising the benefits that come when people do come to the UK. I look at things like the shortage occupation list. There are some jobs that have been on that list since it was created for 10 or 15 years. So people don't feel that there's a responsive system responding to where we do need to bring people in. They feel it's just another way, another unresponsive system that isn't really reflecting on the ground. You asked me about Angela Rayner's comments. What Angela's saying there is that's got to be fair to all parts of the country. There have been situations under this Conservative government where some areas have been asked, I think, to take a share of people, quite rightly, who are coming to the country, but other places haven't. And a bit of fairness and equity is all that Angela's talking about when she gave those comments.
OK, thank you very much for joining us. Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds. I did try to get a number from you on legal and illegal migration, and we didn't get anywhere. Nevertheless, I did persevere. Thank you very much for joining us on GB News. Well, that's all from me for now. But, of course, Dubes & Co. is up next. And don't forget to join us from 6 a.m. tomorrow. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel, followed by Britain's Newsroom at 9:30 with Andrew and Bev. And then, of course, it's Tom and Sophie Reaper, in fact, on Good Afternoon Britain. And then, of course, My Ugly Mush is back from 3 p.m. Now, what do you make of that last interview there? I tried my damnedest to get a figure out of the Labour Party. I think people want to know. I don't think we're any nearer. And yet we're 3 days from the general election. I'll be back tomorrow. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Thanks for your company. Now's your weather with Alex Burkill.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There will be some dry and at times sunny weather around as we go into tomorrow, but there's also going to be quite a bit of cloud for some of us and some outbreaks of rain, all due to a frontal system that is marching its way southeastwards currently. That's already brought a bit of rain across northern parts and will continue to bring some rain across many parts of England and Wales as we go through the rest of today. In the southeast, clinging onto the dry weather well into the overnight period, but then things are going to turn a bit cloudy and a bit damp here as we go through the night. Further west, some clear skies are going to develop overnight, but temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Most places holding up in double digits, particularly mild towards the east of England where we have that thicker cloud. So in the east and southeast, it is going to be a bit of a grey, damp start to the day tomorrow. If we take a closer look, and you can see some drizzly rain around, nothing particularly heavy here. Further west, a brighter picture, some sunny spells, a few showers perhaps for North Wales and northwest England. Mostly dry for Northern Ireland and much of northeastern England and eastern Scotland, but further west over western parts of Scotland, some fairly frequent showery rain quite likely here, perhaps the odd heavier burst, and some slightly blustery winds here, whilst elsewhere the winds don't look particularly strong. As we go through the day itself tomorrow, that rain cloud in the southeast will clear away, and so turning drier here, but otherwise some bright sunny spells for most of us, a bit brighter, sunnier than today generally. However, towards the northwest of the UK, some more persistent showery rain will push its way in and a few showers are possible elsewhere. Temperatures similar to today, but in the southeast where we cling onto a bit more cloud, it may feel a little bit cooler. More rain piling its way in across northern parts as we go through tomorrow evening. Further south though, staying dry as we go through the end of the day. There could even be some late sunshine around. As we go through the rest of the week, some more changeable weather to come, particularly on Wednesday and Friday, and temperatures generally around or a little bit below average.
that warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. The M74 in South Lanarkshire is down to a single lane southbound. Everyone's been funnelled into the inside lane on that two-lane stretch of the motorway. Junction 7 to 8 just south of Larkhill. Emergency repair works are underway following an accident. And there are long queues on the M6 heading south through Warwickshire. This is just north of Coventry, just after Junction 2. The slip road to the Corley services is closed. 2 lanes are also closed on the main carriageway where a car is on fire. And on the M4 in Berkshire, on the westbound entry slip road, a lane is closed. Junction 8, that's the Maidenhead exit. A car is broken down. In Surrey, Claremont Lane has been closed south of Esher all day for accident investigation work. Queues back to the A3. And the M5 in Somerset is blocked northbound 22 to 21 towards Weston-super-Mare following an accident with lengthy queues on the approach. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
£30,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours. It's our biggest cash prize of the year so far, and you could be getting that winning call from us to tell you that you're our next Great British Giveaway winner.
You're joking. Really? Seriously? It's not a line, what is it?
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock. Like I said, I've never won anything like this. That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon. Thank you.
For a chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's TRIC Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast.